Alrighty. We got the tutorial up. I'll probably need to maximize. No, I can't max. Yeah, I just realized I can't do that. So we'll go ahead and theater mode this. Um, sorted. And then lastly, okay. All right. So quick little overview on what I'm doing here. Just so anyone that comes by and decides to check this out later in the future or whenever. Um, I've been doing a little bit of Blender here and there for quite a while now. Not gonna say I'm an expert. I've sold some things. And like I kind of want to expand on that. And I feel like one of the things that might help me do this is review some of the tutorials, which one will help me learn, and two will actually give me better insight. It'll help me learn and review some of the tutorials. So in the future, if I get better, then someone asks me about a good tutorial, I'll have a little bit more insight. I hear a lot of people knock the donut for some reason. There a lot of the complaints that I hear is they don't do low poly, which essentially means like, so low poly building is, say if you take something like this, and you're going to expand on it, you try to avoid using subdivision modifiers for a lot of low poly builds, specifically for like VR chat. Because subdivision modifier generally skyrockets your vertices and your face counts and everything like that, your triangles. Also, like typically like a hard surface modeling is really good for keeping low polys and stuff like that. Um, but we'll see how this goes. Kind of interested to see what kind of techniques he uses and implements, and see how I can use that for myself later in the future. Anyways, we'll get this started right now and follow his nice little tutorial. Just gonna go ahead and start with deleting all this. We don't need it.
Assets or practically anything 3D. And best of all, it's 100% free and it always will be.
Yeah.
Never used it before, but you want to learn it? Well, then you're in the right
Blender's
place.
goated like that.
This is a tutorial for complete beginners. I've been using Blender for 20 years, so I'm going to show you how to use all of its core features. And by the end, you'll finish with not only the confidence to start your own projects, but with your very own donut animation.
I'm going to go ahead and give him a like already.
But I promise you it's achievable for a complete beginner. And I say that with confidence because many already have. This is actually the fourth version.
I feel like a lot of people, like, especially when it comes to me, when it comes to Blender too, is a lot of people go on and off with Blender because you kind of hit these walls that stop you from improving. And usually that's where I feel like tutorials really could kick it into like a higher gear and make it easier to progress instead of just quitting altogether. Sometimes working on smaller projects is better for the long term.
Version of this tutorial. I made the first donut tutorial back in 2016, and I've been remaking it every few years to keep up with Blender's development. In that time, millions of people, just like yourself, have gone from having never used 3D to successfully making their own donuts.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised with how quick he put out tutorials too for the updated versions.
Hit the subscribe button and let's begin. First, go to blender.org/download.
I'll give you a
or
sub.
just click the link in the description. Then, obviously, you got to hit the big download button. Once downloaded on Windows, double-click it and then just go through the install steps. But if you're on a Mac, just drag it into the Applications folder. Then just find the Blender shortcut and open it. Then once it's open, just click anywhere off the splash screen to close it, and welcome to the wonderful world of 3D. First tip, do not get overwhelmed. If you go clicking around, you might find lots of buttons and some of them with very scary names, and it can...
Yeah, my very first time opening Blender, I ended up clicking around exactly how he said. Like don't sit there and just right away click around like that. Um, because I got overwhelmed so quick, I immediately stopped. Like the instant, like I remember, I think I clicked on like it was probably like shading or something, and I saw this and I was like, I'm done. Like there's I don't know where to go from here. I'm done. There's nothing I can do from here. I have no idea what this is. I already feel overwhelmed, and then like you have like texture painting, and you feel like a lot of these like tabs right here, they're critical and they're essential for every step of Blender. But like if you aren't at that step yet, you can't interact with it. You don't know what's going on, and then like as a new person, you just kind of just get lost, confused, and super fucking overwhelmed. I remember immediately stopping.
The thing you know is Blender can do a lot of things, which means it has a lot of tools, but you don't need to know every tool in order to do what you want to do. If you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, there's really only 20% of Blender's features that you end up using 80% of the time. And that's what I'm planning to teach you in this tutorial series. So stay with me and you should be fine. We'll start making the donut.
It's more like you only know 20% of the features at any given time. Pretty much every single tool on Blender serves a purpose, but I feel like even me, when I first discovered like add-ons after spending like 500 plus hours on Blender, I discovered add-ons and realized I was a complete novice. Now I know there's no add-ons or anything right now. This is like a fresh install of Blender. Like, actually, I do need to turn on some things like mesh tools. Oh, no, I still have that. Okay. Mesh tools, loop tools, all very important. But, I just redid my computer and reinstalled everything. I don't have my Vermian, my Retopo, or anything up yet. I'm just chilling right now. But, yeah, like, a lot of the tools, like a lot of the tools do make certain functions way easier. Especially if you're trying to go for low poly.
In the next video, in this one, we're just going to look at the interface and I'm going to show you some of the basic navigation. So for starters, this view, this window right here is your 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time because it is the 3D world. So you can see that we have three objects here. We've got a camera, we've got a cube, and we've got a lamp. And when we click on it, you can see it's selected because it has the yellow outline. So let's delete the default cube, of course.
Looks orange to me, but sure. Yellow's fine.
You can do that by going up to the add menu up here, or by remembering the hotkey, which is Shift
Control A.
So
Or Shift A, yeah.
For add. So usually the one you're looking for is underneath mesh. So these are called your primitives, and it's what you use to start something when you're looking to make an object. Like if you're going to make a chair, you might start with a cylinder as the chair leg and then build out from there. But the one I'm sure you're all very curious, you want to click it, it's the monkey. So let's just click the monkey. Why does Blender have...
I avoid cylinders at all costs, by the way.
3D software has its own little random complex object because it's useful to test things like shaders or complexities of scenes. So 3ds Max has the Utah teapot, Houdini has the toy, and I think Pig's head. Blender has the monkey, and it's actually called the Suzanne monkey head, which you can see in the top left there, named after the orangutan from the film Jay and
under
Silent
this
Bob
one
Strikes Back. Random piece of trivia. So let's get a better look at it. And to that we need to orbit, which you can do by on your mouse there, your scroll wheel. That is called your middle mouse button. If you push that in and then drag around, that is now orbiting. Now, for my laptop users, you've just panicked because you realize you don't have a mouse. How are you going to orbit around? First of all, probably a good idea to get a mouse for 3D work. It will come in handy. But in a pinch, you can get by without it just by up here in the top right-hand corner, this little gray circle, anywhere in the gray section. If you just left-click, drag on that, that will do the exact same thing. Or if you want, you can go to Edit Preferences, and then underneath Input, there's Emulate 3-button mouse. And that means that if you hold down Alt and then left-click, drag, that will do the exact same thing. Also,
I'm glad he's giving that a tip to people, but if you don't have a mouse, spend the $10 and get a mouse, even if it's a cheap mouse. Working on Blender with 2 buttons sounds actually insane.
whilst you are...
And if you plan to use a touchpad, you're actually insane.
In user preferences, you might want to go to interface and you've got resolution scale. If you're on a 4K monitor, you might find that your menus and buttons are really small and you kind of have to like squint in to see it. So personally, I like to keep my 4K monitor around about 1.5. Since this is a tutorial,
How's
I'll make
it
it nice
look
and
on
big so you can
stream?
see what I'm doing.
It's a little small on
that's
stream.
orbiting around with the middle mouse button. If we want to zoom in, we can do that just by scrolling in and out. We could also do it by going up to the magnifying glass tool there and then just left click dragging and then moving the mouse back and forth. That does the same thing. Or you could hold down control and then middle mouse button, and that will do a smooth zoom as well. Okay, so one thing you might notice looking at this is that it's not very pretty, right? It's just kind of got this flat, bland, gray lighting over everything.
Mine's pretty.
This state right now is called viewport shading, and it's kind of a lightweight, optimized way to view the scene just as you're building it. But if you want to create a final pretty image, that's called rendering. And you can actually switch into rendered mode by going up here into the top right-hand corner. You can see we're currently in the viewport shading mode. If we go 2 across, you should see rendered view mode. So if we click that, your computer might stall for a quick second whilst it loads it in, but you can see it's now different.
The reason why mine's blank, so real quick, the reason why mine's blank is because I don't have any light sources because I deleted everything immediately. So we'll go ahead and put a sun. And then we'll go ahead and oh, it doesn't care. It's automatically going to be from that viewpoint. Okay, forget the sun. We'll do spotlights because spotlights are cool. And then rotate it. I forgot the automatic directional, but it doesn't matter. I'll just a little bit more that way. And then probably need to go up. There we go. And then we will turn this bad boy up. Forgot where that's at. 2K? Yeah, 2K is good.
Shadow cast across the monkey. So it's now currently being lit by this lamp up here. So if I wanted to, zoom in on that lamp there and just kind of like move it around, you can see it's kind of hard to focus on. Like it's always exactly not in the right view. And that's because we are centered on our monkey right now. We need to change the focus. We need to pan to something else. So we could do that one of 2 ways. One, if you're on a laptop, you could use the little move tool there. That will do that. Or everyone else, shift, middle mouse click, drag, that will do the same thing. So middle mouse is for orbiting, shift middle mouse is for pan to change your view to something else. Okay, so I want to move my light because it's too moody. I want to be able to see the monkey's face there. So to move an object, you could do it one of 2 ways. One, you could go over to the left-hand corner here and you've got the move tool. When you click that, you can see that the selected object, the lamp, has this gizmo, it's called, with these axes on it. And if I just clicked and dragged on any of those arrows there, you can see I can move it along any of those axes. I could also just click on that white circle there, and that will just freehand drag it depending on my view. But it's kind of tedious. Every time you want to move something, you have to like go to that tool and then find the arrows and yada yada. So actually, most people in Blender prefer to use the hotkeys. So we just keep it in the default.
Most people? I guess that's fair. But by most, he means like 99.99%. Like if you're new, you might build a habit to go up here and click on these. Certain ones I would understand because they're not used as often. Generally, move, scaling, those should be the first ones. Oh, and rotate. Like move, scaling, and rotate should automatically be like the first ones you learn right off the bat, which is G, S, and R. Really easy.
Selection stay here, and instead remember the hotkey, which is G for grab. Now I've just tapped the key, and you'll notice as I move my cursor that it's now attached to my cursor. My cursor isn't even actually close to it. In fact, my cursor could be on the other side of the screen, and I could tap G, and it will move it. And at first, this is kind of awkward. You're like, why is it working this way? But once you get used to it, you realize it's actually handy because you don't have to spend all this time like navigating your cursor to something just so that you can move it. Your cursor could be over here and then just tap it and you're moving it. So whilst you're in this move state, if you want to cancel a movement, you could do it one of two ways. You could just hit escape, or you could right click. Then if you want to confirm a movement, like say I want to move my lamp here and I like the movement, I could just do a single left click. So again, if I want to cancel something, just right click. If I want to confirm the movement, left click. But let's say I wanted to move it along an axis, like, I like these arrows here and I want to be able to move it on just a specific axis. Well, I can do that whilst I'm in that grab state as well. So after I've hit the G key to grab it, I can then tap the letter of the axes that I want to move it on. So if you don't know, in the real world and in the 3D software, there are 3 axes because there's 3 dimensions. There's the X axis, which I can move it by hitting the X key, the Y axis to move it back and forth along the Y axis with the Y key, or the Z axis to move it up and down on the Z axis. So you can remember those letters, the X, Y, and Z, or the method that I actually prefer to use is whilst you're in that G state, if you just hold down the middle mouse button and then pull out, you can see you get this like gray line that pulls out from the center. And then if you just drag out and move around, it will snap it to the nearest axes, which again is maybe...
I don't like that at all. No, I hate that. That sounds disgusting. I wouldn't use that.
Be an odd way to work, but it's actually really handy because it means you don't have to think of the letter and locate it on your...
I mean, all the axes are located relatively close to the G key. It's not like you have to reach across the keyboard. In my opinion, it's if you play any video games, you should be able to click it with no problems.
The keyboard, I can just tap G to move it and then middle mouse drag out and then just find that exact axis that I'm looking for. And so it's very fast to just quickly move the lamp exactly where I want it. By the way, if you're finding it hard to remember all of the keyboard shortcuts that I've mentioned, I've actually put together a PDF, a cheat sheet of Blunder's most common hotkeys, and you can download...
Let's check that out real quick. Let's go over some of these. Okay. T for toolbar properties. Oh yeah, hide and unhide is going to be something you use a lot too. I don't really use the annotate that much. I wonder if he gives us a good example to use annotate. I don't even know what fly means.
Of Blunder's most common...
No F3?
hotkeys, and you can download that by clicking the link in the description, so you could print it out or you could just have it on a separate monitor.
He has F3 way in the back.
From another 3D software package, you might notice that Blender's hotkeys are different than what you are used to. So if you actually go to preferences, just for those people that are from other softwares, if you change the key map to industry compatible, you'll find that these shortcuts are probably more in line with what you remember from other software. I'll also put a link to a cheat sheet just for the industry compatible.
That's actually a really good tip.
Nothing to do with it, but I'll put that link there so you can check it out as well. For the rest of this tutorial series, I'm going to use Blender's hotkeys. Just keep that in mind. Now, let's say, as I am moving around here, I'm like, oh, this looks really good. I've got some nice Rembrandt lighting across the monkey's face. I want to take a photo. I want to take a nice, pretty image of this and post it on socials for clout, right?
Oh, God, I need a camera now.
Screenshot of it, but that would be silly because it's got all these lines all over. It's all noisy, right? We don't like it. The way you take a photo, a pretty image in Blender, is to do a render. So you could do that one of two ways, by going up to render and hitting render image, or remembering the hotkey, which says next to it F12. So when you do that, a little window will pop up. It will use your CPU or GPU, depending on which renderer you've got active, and it will render out a pretty image. And from here, you could go image and then save as, and that'll save it as a PNG or whatever, wherever you want to save it. But you might notice looking at this that this is actually a different view than what we have here, right? So here I've got a nice view of the monkey's face, but there is a different view. And the reason for that is when you do a render, it's not rendering from the view that you're looking at currently. It's always going to render from the point of view of the camera. So this is our camera over here, and it's looking from this angle. And we can actually look through the camera by just clicking the little camera icon there, or by remembering the hotkey, which is number pad 0. So how do we move the camera? Well, Blender's a little awkward, maybe a little different to other software packages, but you're supposed to like hit G to move it, and then like middle mouse to zoom in and out. And then if you want to like move it along an axis, I guess G and then X. You could do that, but actually what a lot of users prefer, especially those from other software packages, is if you've got your camera selected, which by the way, I haven't mentioned this, but up here, this is your outliner. It's kind of an inventory of every item that you've got in your scene. Okay, so with the camera there selected, if I hit N, N is to bring up the properties, N for properties for whatever reason, and then go to view. There's a little box there that just says lock to camera to view. So now with that active, if I just use the same keyboard shortcuts as before, middle mouse button to orbit around, shift middle mouse to drag it, you can see that the camera is moving with it. So essentially the
Oh, that's cool.
Exactly as
I did not know about that.
Hit N again, and then I can disable that. And then now as I pull out, you can see that the camera will stay exactly where it was. And I could do a lovely, pretty render. But this is too simple. If we post this on the internet, people are bound to make fun of us. Imagine that. Well, we could give it some color, right? So with our monkey head selected, we can go over to here to the properties. So this properties section is where you might spend the other, I don't know, another 5 to 8%. I don't know, getting too exact there. You might spend another 5% of your time in this section, but it's where all of the properties for things are in Blender. So for example, you've got like the render properties, like the size of the image that you're saving something as is defined there. And some of these properties will stay here no matter what is selected, but others are selection dependent. So you can see actually, if I click the camera there, you can see I get a little camera tab at the bottom there. But if I select my monkey, you'll see the camera tab disappears. But instead, I have some other ones that appear. So one that we might want to change is underneath material. And this will enable us to add a material, change the color to something else, essentially. So underneath here, where it's got new, I'm just going to hit new. And then you've got a bunch of options, very confusing. Ooh, IOR. Subsurface. Again, don't worry about it. We'll get to all of that later on. The one that defines the color is the base color. So if I do a single left click on that white box there, I can then change this color to whatever I want. I could make it an odd, creepy, skin-toned monkey head, right? Like that. And do a render. Okay, so hey, all right, it's better, but still it's too simple. I think people will think we haven't put enough effort into this masterpiece. So let's add another object. Let's give the monkey a hat. So if we want to add another object, how do we do it? Well, we could go to the add menu, like I mentioned before, or the hotkey Shift A. So
I like how he's going over the controls over and over again.
Boxy hat. Let's do a party hat with a cone. So once we've added that object, you can see it's just plopped it straight in the center, intersecting our monkey. So we need to move it. We can move it, and we could grab it with the G key. So it's now moving it just on our cursor there. I don't want to move it just freehand though, because I like the position, but I just want to move it up. So I'm going to hit Z to move it along the Z axis. Right, I like it there. So once I like the placement, I'm just going to do a single left click. Okay, great. But too big. See, we need to learn another tool, which is scale. So we could go to the scale tool there, and then we get this familiar little axes there. But again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which for scale is just S. So S to scale. So resizing that. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's move it down again. So G and Z. Okay. All right, but yeah, let's say we want to make it a little taller. Okay, so we could scale it along just the Z axis. So S and then Z, whoops, S, Z, there we go. And it's now making it a tall party hat. Scale it down. There we go. Ha, look at that. Be a very bland party if it's gray though. So let's give it another material, an exciting color, a vibrant aqua color. Why not? Give that a render by hitting F12. Okay. Camera is in the wrong position, so let's go to camera view mode with number pad 0. I'm going to select my camera, and rather than dabbling with that little thing,
Oh my god, creating some new materials.
And then middle mouse, just tap it once. As I said, it's a little awkward. Blender's the way it handles with the camera. But anyway, just move that out, and then I got to rotate it. All right, so I'm going to rotate. So with the camera selected, tap R, then middle mouse, and it's now kind of like freehand rotating around. So I'll just move it up slightly. There we go. Okay, this is just a fool around session, so don't worry if you're making mistakes. We'll get to actual practical building stuff in the next part. I'm just trying to find ways to throw in these like fundamental tools. Rotate, right? The monkey's head is just, he needs to look dead on at the camera, and currently he's off. What an excuse to use the rotate tool. So you could enable the rotate tool, right? The familiar axes there. You could click and rotate it around like that. Again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which is R to rotate, right? So it's now just freehand rotating on my cursor. Remember the axes, as I mentioned before, can be used for any mode. So the X-axis will rotate it back and forth. The Y-axis, tilt it, or Z, there we go, to turn it towards the camera. Just a little bit, right? And there you go, F12. And we've done it. Let's save it. Let's upload it to ArtStation, and then just wait for the recruiters, essentially.
All the thumbs ups.
New scene so that we can get ready for part 2, where we're going to actually start building our donut and learning some of the more core features of Blender. So click here, and I will see you in part 2. Now we know how Blender functions. Let's start building.
I think that was a really good tutorial. It was, very direct to just getting you used to working with Blender. I think it was cool. I think it might have been a little too long for an intro though, but it was good.
So as before, let's well, first of all, just to repeat, make sure you are working with a new scene, completely new scene. Don't want any remaining monkey heads lying around. Let's begin fresh slate, and let's delete our default cube just with the delete key, and let's replace it with a new object. You might remember the hotkey for that is Shift A. And as I mentioned before, you usually want what is underneath mesh, because these are your primitives. So we want to start with something that most resembles what it is we're building. If it was a house, you might start with a cube. If it was a vase, you might start with a cylinder. In our case, we want the donut-shaped one, although mathematicians call it a torus for some reason. So let's add that. Now, if I zoom in by scrolling up, we can see we have something resembling a donut. Looks like a pretty weak-looking donut, very flimsy. Looks like the donut before it's cooked, when they just drop it into the vat, and it's just this little wispy thing. So immediately after you do some actions in Blender, you have options to change it. And the options are hidden down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see a little box, and if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. Now, something to note is that these options in Blender only appear immediately after you have done that action. If you do another action, like say deselect your torus by mistake, it's gone, right? Because Blender has assumed you have moved on. You've accepted the state of your donut, and this is the one you want, right?
This is what you get now. No changes. You're not allowed.
Some severe way. You can temporarily bring it back by hitting F9. I never actually remember that hotkey. I just remember that immediately after I have added.
I just remake mine too. It doesn't really matter.
Before I move on to something else. Okay. So we could change, the size of it here. We can also change the resolution. I'll use the term resolution loosely. To make it higher or lower fidelity. And a mistake that a lot of beginners make, and I say this because this was the exact mistake I made way back in 2003 when I started learning Blender, is they go, well, I need a realistic looking donut, so I guess I need to go really
super high poly count
resolution. I remember my first project, one of my first projects was for a high school film project, and I wanted to have a close-up of a face. Didn't realize faces were going to be difficult, but I went really high poly, and then it was just an absolute nightmare to work with. So the reason you don't want this is that, for starters, things that are high poly are very slow to render, and they're very hard to work with if you want to tweak the shape of it. But also, as you learn and you grow with 3D, you'll discover that it is A lot easier to add resolution to something later on, but it is very difficult to take it away if you've already built it into it and you don't need it. So, long way to say, what we actually want is to have as few polys, these are called polys.
I could see where people could argue that you need high poly for sculpting, which is a whole thing in Blender that a lot of people do. And then you have to learn how to retopo and all sorts of other stuff. But I think for like a new user, that's a pretty good statement to go with. It's like, don't worry about having, like, avoid having high poly at the start. And then once you start learning Blender, you can start adapting, right?
As you can get away with. So I'm going to go with 32 major and 12 minor. And don't worry,
sure,
it's all jagged because
let's work with that.
In a moment. Now, the major and minor, this is really up to you, but I find that something that looks kind of chunky, like a fat donut, just looks really delicious. So I'm going with something around about this size, okay? And once I'm happy with this, once I'm ready to click off, I click off, the options are gone, and this is it. This is the donut that I am now working with. So how do we make this look higher resolution, less jagged? Well, one way is to use smooth shading. So if you right-click with your object selected, go to Shade Smooth. And look at that, this is immediately better. Without getting too technical, this is kind of a fakery. It's sort of like the shader is telling the renderer that this is a really high poly dense mesh when it really isn't. It's just basically kind of like averaging out faces, and anyway, it's very technical, but basically means it's not going to add anything to your render time, but it's going to look smoother. And so this is generally what you want for something that is smooth and organic looking like we want. If you were rendering like architectural or like hard surfaces, like later on we're going to put this on a counter, then the object would obviously want to be flat. But in our case, we're just going to use Shade Smooth. But you might notice that looking at this, especially if you go side on, that you've got this sort of jagged shape around here, right? So the silhouette is really breaking that illusion that this is a high poly or a
subdivision
looking donut. But thankfully, rather than adding all of that complex density into the mesh itself and then making it hard to remove later on, there's another way through modifiers. So if we go over
he's going to do subdivision.
Right, it's very confusing, lots of option looking properties. Click on the wrench, and this is the section called modifiers. And this is one of those object dependent things. So if you've got your camera selected, you won't see it. So it's only when you've got actual meshes that you might see this modifier here. So it's much easier to explain if we just add one. So up here, add modifier, and you got a range of options here that can do a whole number of things. The one that we're looking for is underneath generate, and it is called subdivision surface. And it is a really common modifier that you use all the time. In fact, it's so common, it's actually, you can just immediately add it to any object just by hitting Control 1. But don't do that because we've already got it, so there. Now, some of you might have just discovered that your donut has disappeared. If that is the case, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, and then underneath Viewport, where it's got Subdivision at the very bottom, Disable GPU Subdivision. That will then make the subdivision perform on your CPU instead of your GPU, which is maybe non-existent or not performing whatever. But disable that and it should appear. But if it's already working for you, don't disable it. Keep it going because GPU will be faster. So what exactly is this doing? Well, it's a lot easier to explain if we look at the shade flat mode, because we're not being tricked by the smooth shading there. If I set this levels viewport to 0, this is our original mesh. This is before we add the subsurface, essentially. When we increase this, you can see that it is adding resolution to our mesh. And the more I increase this viewport levels here, the finer and finer that detail becomes. So to explain it, because this is such a very, very common modifier, it's kind of important to understand how it's working. You can see that this is these squares here, these are called faces, by the way. And for each one of these faces here, as I add a level,
Jesus, there's a kid getting murdered outside or something. Holy crap.
And then now if I zoomed in on this one face here, if I do another level, that's now become 4 faces. And then if I zoom in again, it's now become 4 faces. So it's exponentially adding detail. And you might also know that it is smoothing it out as well. Like this jagged edge that we've got here, you can see now becomes smoother. So to quickly visualize that, if I just draw it, like imagine you've got like a 90-degree corner, right? Like this. If you add a subsurf modifier, what it's going to do is it's going to add a point here, right? Because this is the extra detail. It's also going to take that point there and it's going to average it out. It's going to average it out between these points. And it's going to create another one there and another one there. So you go then from having that really hard corner there to having something that looks a lot smoother. So it's going to take a point and it's also going to change it to make it look smoother, generally speaking. So there we go. So now as I increase this, you can see it's getting smoother and smoother. Now, the reason there are two options here, you've got levels viewport and levels render. So reminder, this gray area that we operate in is called our viewport. The render is the pretty version. So as an example, you could see if I just turned it off for the viewport, it looks very jagged. But then for my render, if I increase that to 3, if I do my render, which you could go up there and render image, or remember the hotkey F12, you can see that is now smooth, but nice. And you can see it's jagged. So the viewport, you want to generally keep it lightweight, and then the render time, that's where you want to get a really nice looking pretty image. So you want to often have 2 different levels. In our case though, I don't really think we need to go beyond 1, even for our final pretty image, because this with shade smoothing turned on is good enough. And we're going to be adding more to the scene later on, so we don't want to make it too complex. So this is actually pretty good. Okay, so we have a perfect donut, and that's the problem. It's too perfect. You could spend decades trying to develop a machine in the real world that made a donut this perfect, and you never would. This is so mathematically precise that the eye will always see this as looking fake. So that's actually a problem you learn pretty quickly in 3D, that things that are too perfect just look fake. So you have to spend time making things look misshapen and adding variation there like you see in the real world, because your eye expects to see it. So how do we do that? How do we make this donut look a little more lumpy and interesting? I do that by changing the mesh itself. So this mode that we are in right now, where we can click on different objects, is called object mode. And I know that because in the top left-hand corner, you can see we are in object mode. But if I click the drop down, you can see I get a number of other options here. And these options, again, will change depending on the object you've got selected. If I've got a lamp, my little light there selected, you can see I've only got object mode. My camera, I've only got object mode. But a mesh will give you extra options here. So let's enter into edit mode. Ooh. Right. Now, you can see our mesh, our object has become something that looks weird. It's got a bunch of little points on it with lines and very technical. Well, that's because this is actually what the mesh is made up of. These little points here, which you can click on just by selecting, are called your vertices. The singular term is called vertex. I never say that. I like to just call all of them vertices, regardless of whether it's 1 or 2, just because you always get some comments that go, actually, it's called vertex if it is singular. Anyway.
Yeah, but how many times do you see any Blender creation that's a single vertex? Actually, it's so uncommon to do. It just feels unnatural for a lot of people. One of the things that I would... he might say it, so I'll just continue, but I'll just cue mine up. I'm wondering if he's going to have you show statistics so you can actually see the full combination of these. Though he may not want to, because subdivision does weird stuff. It, like, when you exit subdivision, this is being applied to your object. It's not like this is the full 3K triangles, but when you're in it, you see that it's down to 768 because that's how many well, technically, if you divide that by 2, that's how many faces we have, because our brain works well in quads, not so well in triangles.
Right. So
We'll see if he shows that for people.
2 of them joined by a line, that is called an edge, and if you have 4 of them forming a face, then it's called a face. So with these, I can quickly change the shape of my object by using the same hotkeys as before, and if I want to move...
Yes and no. You don't need 4 for a face. There's n-gons and tries and stuff like that. They also count as faces.
This, this, then I would simply tap G, right? And you can see it's now attached to my cursor. And then if I want to confirm its movement, I just do a single left click, and there it is. Now, if I go back into object mode, like that, you can see that my mesh has changed, okay? And by the way, the hotkey for jumping in and out of object and edit mode is just tab, okay? So you can see it's just toggling between those two modes because it's so common that you want to just quickly change things that it's just easily accessible by that. Now, this is okay, right? But you can see it's like, it's got like some artifacting. It's like, it's not the greatest lump, right? So how do
It's not the greatest lump.
natural? You could, you move one, drag it out, okay, click, and then I move, the next one next to it, right? I'll move that out, and then I'll move this one out a little bit, and then I move this one, and it's like, okay, well now I've got the thing, but it took me like 5 actions. Ridiculous, right? No one wants to do that. No one's got time for that.
Randomizer?
There is a tool in Blender just for this, and it's called proportional editing, and you can enable it up there in your toolbar. So if you enable that, now if I hit G,
yeah.
I get a little ring around my cursor there, and that is now changing the mesh around it. Now, a lot of people...
Is it O? Yeah,
like,
it's O.
I don't see what's going on. You have to have something selected first, and then when you hit G, you will see that little circle of influence. Okay, now this circle of influence, if I scroll up, you can see it's shrinking its circle of influence. And if I scroll down, it is expanding its influence. So it's only going to affect what is in that ring there, okay? If you are on, if you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can also change the influence by using page up and page down. And if you don't have page up or page down because you're on a Mac keyboard, then what you would have to do is go to key map and then change your page up and page down to something else just so that you could get around that. But guys, you got to get a mouse. Get a mouse with a scroll wheel. I think,
Yeah, that's...
I don't know, 50 cents or just in the nearest landfill. Get a mouse because it's going to make your life in 3D a lot.
That's what I was saying earlier on his first video. It's like, dude, if you're trying to do Blender without a mouse, you're a masochist. If you're doing it with a laptop touchpad, you're actually insane, in my opinion. Like, there's no human way to work with Blender and complete a project with just straight up touchpad. That sounds ludicrous to me.
Okay, so with this, I can now make quick work of lumpy shapes, okay? So I just drag that out, okay? I've got a little lumpy shape there. Maybe I go down here and I pull this up just by hitting G, moving it up, okay? So already this is looking a little more natural, right? Because even if we were making a stylized world for a Pixar movie or something like that, you can't have just a spherical looking donut.
Does he want us to just mess up the donut now?
Because it just, your eye will see it as fake. So very quickly, I'm able to add a little bit of variation to the donut, just all around it, just a little bit over here. And you can see that I am just changing my circle of influence depending on what size of a lump I want to make. So I just want to make like a little bit that sticks out. I can make a small circle just by scrolling up like that. And you just want to do that until you get something that looks a little more natural. I might want to make the inner part as well. Maybe just drag that in with a smaller circle. And that's pretty good. Let's just have a look from the top. I might actually just drag that out, make it a little bit more like that. But there you go. That's pretty good for a donut. It's still kind of simple. It's not too detailed, but it's got just enough variation in it that it's more interesting to look at. Oh, one more thing.
Big tip too is you want some form of variation for almost every vertice. And I know that sounds like insane, but in actuality, like, there's never a very smooth surface unless it's like man-made metal, right? It is like, even in cake world, people spend so much time trying to get like a smooth top of a cake that the only realistic way of doing it is you cook your cake, then you cut the cake, so you flush out the top, and then you use something with some form of viscosity, such as like icing or something like that, to smoothen the top of it. Rarely ever are you gonna find a donut, even if it's baked in one of those like donut molds or whatever. We're saying you're not deep frying, right? Like straight up baked in a mold. Even those are gonna come up with a lot of craters and imperfections constantly. So having some form of like variation on almost every single vertex or vertices, it's almost essential. Like it is very strange. It is very weird. For like even this bottom right here, like you're gonna see that I'm going through and I'm like modifying this part, bringing it down, bringing it up, doing all this kind of stuff, and I'm just I'm not thinking about it. I'm just adding layers of imperfections, and the more you add these imperfections, the better it's gonna be, the more realistic. So like right now, like gobbledygook, right? And I notice right here it's a little too smooth for my liking, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more too, you know. And it like little bumps. You can even add indents too. Like let's say I add this little indent right here, it just exaggerated all the other parts. Now you can see like there's a lot of layering here that makes it look more realistic. It's offset. It's strange, and even this smooth shading is actually doing injustice to it. But I'm pretty sure later on he's gonna have you doing a lot of texturing and stuff, or adding stuff to normals. That's really gonna change stuff. So we'll see what he does.
Go back into edit mode with tab. Donuts, when they're sitting in the little vat thing, right? They're only like half submerged, so then they have to be flipped. But it means that the bit that's nearest to the surface is getting less heat. So essentially what I'm saying is the bit that's around the donut, the circumference of it, is usually a little bit flatter. So donuts aren't like perfectly round all the way around. They're usually a little bit flatter. So what I want to do is I want to select these vertices along here, and then I want to shrink them. Now I could go around one by one like this, which is actually what I used to do when I was learning Blender pre-YouTube days, and there was no tutorials. I would do this if I wanted to select this. Silly, because there's a function, a tool for that, and it is edge select. So if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and then do a single left click on not the points, but on the edge, right, this little line here, you can see it's selected all the way around. So it's anything that's connected along that line is now selected. So if I want to shrink this, right, what would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. And I actually don't want proportional editing. So I'm going to turn that off and now scale in and just make it a little bit flatter. And there you go. See, it just feels a little bit more natural, doesn't it? Looks a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. And by the way, don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this, like your lump is a little bit off. Like some people get a little bit too precious with the tutorial. I got to match exactly everything I do. Like I'm just working on the fly as well. So just make what you think looks good. Maybe you think this is not misshapen enough and you want to add more, go for it, because it might actually turn out better than what mine is. Now, before we move.
Yeah, you know what? He's a really good teacher, man. I think a lot of the quote unquote Blender pros that I met, they don't give this guy a lot of justice, because this seems like a very good stereotypical tutorial, or not tutorial, sorry, class. It's almost like a class setting where it's like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and just play around with it and see what works for you. Which I think it's a great way of teaching Blender.
To the next part, how to save. How to save. Blender.
Control
very,
S.
Very easy. You just go save as. And
I think it's Control S.
It's called dot blend.
Donut.
Literal file extension. It really pushes what file extension can be. That's almost a word. Blender. Anyway, dot blend, and that's it. And then next time you open it up, it's exactly like it. It's not like ZBrush where you got like 4 or 5 different ways to save a project or an object or a tool or a hate ZBrush. Okay, that's how you save. Now, also, finally, I would say if you need help, because I know if you're stuck and then you leave a YouTube comment, you might not get a reply. If you want immediate help, I've got a Discord. So I'll put the link below. So there's like a little channel in there where you can just ask for specific donut help. So if you're having issues, feel free to jump into that. And also, guys, don't beat yourself up. Like 3D is definitely has like a steep-ish learning curve. So you're in that steep slope right now. And it's really common. Like a lot of this stuff is very foreign. 3D is very unique. It's very different to a lot of 2D tools. But don't give up. Like it's definitely achievable to learn and self-learn at home. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to pay for a tutor. It's really easy to get help online nowadays. So do make use of that Discord. Post comments as well in the YouTube comments if you want to. But I hope you stay with it. So if you're ready to jump to the next part after you've saved your blend file, go ahead, click here, and I will see you there. Did you guys know that?
So, I mean, all that, I guess people could argue all that can be congested down to 5 minutes, but he spent the whole 20 minutes explaining reasons, giving motivation, and to be honest, I think he underplayed the steep curve by a lot, because a lot of times you'll get comfortable, you'll run into a problem, you'll take a break, you'll come back, you'll figure out how to handle the problem, you'll hit a new problem, you get stressed out, you take a break, and it happens all the time. But I like how motivating he is. Like he's definitely talking one-on-one, and like, projects aside, like he is introducing a lot of tools, and the way he's presenting it is very encouraging.
Blender 4.0 had a change that makes it more realistic by default, or that there's a new technology that is going to expand the uses for 3D exponentially. Well, you would if you were on my free newsletter called This Week in 3D. It's an email from me once a week with 3 to 5 things that I found interesting that week from the world of 3D. So sometimes I share a new tool that I found, a remarkable tutorial, a new Blender feature, a news story that affects the industry. So click the link in the description, enter your email address, and then you will stay up to date on the world of 3D. It's always free and it's always written by me. Now, on to the tutorial. Welcome back to the Donut Show, where we make sad little donuts that we cannot eat. This is where we finished up at the end of part 1. We've got our nice looking donut, and now we're going to make that icing, which looks complex, but is actually fairly simple. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to add an object, you go Shift A, right? And then you start with something that resembles what you're trying to create. But we already have something that resembles the exact shape we want to create. It's the donut, because we want the icing around the donut. So let's just reuse this information. So we can do that by duplicating the object.
I think he's...
and if you don't know the hotkey for it, you could just go Object, and then you'd find it here.
Is he going to try and cut off the thing?
So Shift D. Now, when you hit that, you are in a placement state, essentially. Like it's duplicated, and it's now saying, where do you want to place it? Now, in our case,
this is what he's doing.
Often, you don't actually want to change its placement. You want to duplicate it exactly where it was. So you can cancel the movement by hitting Escape or right-clicking. Now, when you do that, it looks like it's canceled the duplication, but you can see in your outliner, it has duplicated it. You've got 2 objects, but it's just in the exact same place, which is what we want. So first things first, we need to name them, or else we could get very confused very easily. So you can name an object by just double-clicking it in the outliner and then just typing in the object. The other way you can name something, I'll just show you the second way. If you select the Taurus 0.001, that's your icing object. If you're in the 3D view, where your cursor, is over the 3D viewport, if you hit F2, that's another very quick way that you can name something without having to go up to the outliner to find your object. So with our icing object selected, let's go into edit mode by hitting Tab. So we want the icing on the top, which means this bottom half of our mesh here is redundant. Don't need it. So we want to delete it. So if we just dragged over the bottom here, you can see it looks like we've selected the bottom half of our donut, but if you were to move around, you would see, oh, we haven't actually. It's only selected, annoyingly, what is facing the camera. Where there's a mesh, it's not gone through the mesh. A lot of users find this annoying. I agree. Sometimes it seems like that would be the more default one that would make more sense. But anyway, don't want to argue. So if you want to select through a mesh, you can go up to here in your top navigation, toggle X-ray. If you turn that on, it's going to enable you to see through the mesh. And now when I drag over it, you can see that I have selected all through the mesh as I move around it. By the way, you might find it like when you're in this state, it's kind of hard to select. Like it's easy to kind of accidentally select what is above it. And depending on what you've got at your end, that might have happened already.
I am so glad he mentioned this. If you notice, what I did is I just cut off a chunk of vertices. So what I do, and this is very common for a lot of things that I work on, is generally I'll find like the section. If I want it to be uniform, I'll find the section. The way I did this is like Alt click on that edge. It's going to go all the way around, and then it's going to delete that, you know, and then like I'll go through, do it on the same on the other side. You can click through a mesh when you're on the inside, right? So this is considered outside. This is considered inside. And then, so I click through, delete those vertices, and then I highlight one of the vertices, or it might even work on the face or edge. Yeah. So it doesn't matter as long as you highlight like a face, edge, or whatever. When you hit L, it's going to select that whole section. And that's how I made the top for that. And then I used Alt scaling for increasing the thickness, make it a thick boil. And then that way it keeps all the positions of the vertices while just making it a little bit thicker. So, I mean, that's how I run through it. I'm more curious about what he's going to explain. I'm super glad he talked about that X-ray. I wonder if he's going to talk about the shortcut that'll deselect extra, like, what is it called? So you have edge pathing based on what is known as the topology, right? When I do that selection, right, this is an edge path. It goes all the way around. It doesn't diverge or go anywhere else. If you're new to Blender, I'm not going to go talking crazy amount about like doing triangles and stuff like that right now. But I wonder if he's going to talk about the hotkey for selecting or deselecting the additional edge paths. So let me go ahead and delete that. See what he says.
So another
Super
way
curious.
to easily just look directly on the side-on of your donut is to just click one of these, like in your gizmo here, instead of just dragging around. Just do a single click on either the green one or the red one, the X or the Y. And now we're in that state. You can see it's flattened it, so it's put you in orthographic mode. Which actually
another good way is learning your numpad. Play with your numpad more.
All the way through the mesh. Select. All right. Okay. All right. So we want to delete that. So just hit the delete key. You get an extra option here of what do you want to delete: edges, faces. You want the vertices. That's everything. And now we have, if we go back to object mode, and then let's turn off toggle X-ray as well, and you can see it's working. We got half the donut on top of itself, but as you move around, you can see you get some flickering. Now, this flickering happens, and it's actually a very common. It's actually a good
faces fighting
to you as an artist, because it means you've got faces on top of faces, and the 3D software doesn't know which face it wants to render, right? So it's like sometimes saying it's the front face, no, the back face, the front face, and there's no understanding. Sometimes you can actually spot it in TV shows and like VFX or like low budget stuff. You can see something flickering in the background, and I'm like, ooh, there it is, Z fighting. That's what it's called. Z.
Yeah, Z fighting.
Z fighting, if you're not American. So what we want to do is we want to give thickness to our icing. So we can do that with a solidify modifier. So adding another modifier. Make sure you've got your icing selected, and then here where you've got add modifier, we're going to go generate.
Yeah, solidify.
Okay. Now it's made it worse. It's actually added a thickness to our mesh there, but it's actually done it the wrong way. So it's with the normals. Yeah, what is it? It's trying to put the the extra bit inside the donut. So we can change that by just changing the offset here in the solidifier settings. Just drag that all the way to 1. Some of you might have actually found that it was correct before, just depending on which way your normals were. If that's the case, keep it at -1, but everyone else keep it at 1. We just want to make sure it's actually outside. Okay. Let's just increase the thickness a little bit too. Let's go, 0.025. That looks pretty good. And great.
I prefer 0.
Looks like a yarmulke.
So I work on 0 because it affects both sides. So you control both sides of the thickness. When you're on, let's say 1, it's, for this case, if I expand this out, it's just going to go out, right? Let me undo that. If it's at -1, it'll go in, right? So if I do this, you'll see like all that diffraction is because it's going in that much. So personally, I like working on 0. It just keeps things a little bit more uniform. It provides me a little bit more control.
On our donut, a perfectly straight edge little hat for our donut. So let's make this look more like icing. So the edge is wavy all the way around. So to do this, this is where we get into the fancy, finger magic. Lots of keys. Anyway, go into edit mode, and we can see straight away that we can't see the mesh, and that's because the solidify modifier is obstructing our view. So these little boxes here, as I mentioned before, like this is to hide it from viewport. But if you want to just hide it from your edit mode, which is the state that we are in right now, the box next to it is the one that you uncheck.
I wonder if he's going to say extrude or drag it down.
Tabbed in object mode, you can still see it, but edit mode, it's it's temporarily hidden for you.
Probably drag it down.
To select one of these points here and move it down, you can see that it's working, but it would be, again, a lot of effort to go round and round and do these one by one. So we want to use that old familiar proportional fall-off tool again. So proportional editing on, and now as I move it down, let's just lower the slider way down here, and then let's pull this down. Okay, now we'll find issues. If we move to the side here, we can see the first issue we've discovered is that this is separating from our mesh here. And that's not what icing does. When it dribbles down, it follows the shape of the donut all the way down. So what we want to do is snap, undo it a number of times, snap the snap the vertices to our donut underneath it.
Yeah.
Right? So for that, we need to turn on snap.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, now there are a number of ways.
Is he calling it?
Yeah,
he's calling it.
Default way is
it's magnet.
the grid floor there. Like if you were to just like move it around, you can see it's just snapping to the grid floor.
Starts clipping a lot.
You want to snap it to the face. And now with face snapping enabled, if we move this down, we can see, let's just look here, that the bottom bit is snapping to the face, but as you might have seen, the top bits, the rest of
face project
inside of our circle of influence with this proportional editing, that's not being affected. Only the little point that we had selected was affected. So that's not what we want either. Normally that would be enough, but in this particular case, we want to also snap individual elements too. And let's go face project. Now, when we pull this down, you should see that these are also no longer clipping through the donut. But still, we have issues. Why is that? Well, it is actually working correctly. We can see these are not going through the mesh. So why does it look like it is? The reason for that is that there's actually just not enough information here. So if we go side on, you can see, right, like we've got this point here, and then we've got another point down here, and then we've got this long stretch in between, right? So that means that this part of the donut, oh gosh, that goes that goes around like that is just not, there's nothing to snap it to, essentially. So what we need to do to fix this is just add more geometry. So these little vertices here, we need more of those vertices. So we can do that by actually using the subdivision surface modifier. Because although it is a modifier, you can apply the modifier. And the modifier currently is adding geometry, so let's just apply it. So to apply it, we just click this little drop down here next to the modifier, and then go apply. Now, if we, nothing things should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see exponentially more faces, because here, where there was one face before, you can see there's now a lot more, right? 4x. Okay, 4x. Okay, so now if we pull down, we should see it is snapping. And if we go into this mode, you can see that it's now conforming to the mesh in a much more snug way, because there's information there for it to use. Now this shading artifact here that we can see, this don't worry about that, we'll fix that in just a moment. But I need to show, because I've shown you like 4 things that we need to enable for this to work. I got to show you one more, because if I pull down and if I scroll up, you'll see something. Okay, if I was to click, we get this horrible problem here. And I've done this tutorial on enough, and enough people have hit this issue that I need to call it out specifically, because it seems to be a big point that a lot of people just don't know where to go from. What's happened is if we use what's it called, the circle of influence for our proportional editing, if that is so high, it's actually high enough to reach the mesh on the other side of the donut. And then because we've got snapping, it's now projecting that, snapping it to the front, which is creating this like something that's a nightmare to fix. I mean, in fact, it's easier just to start from scratch than to try to fix that. So if we want, sorry, there's a lot of noise. To fix this, we need to hide the part of the mesh that we don't want to be influenced by our proportional tool, right? So to do that, there is an easy way to do it. We can actually do it very precisely. So if with this middle bit of our donut here, if I just hold down Alt and then do a left click, as I mentioned before, that selects the ring, okay? And we could do that all the way up, but actually there's a little, I don't know if it's an Easter egg. It's kind of a cool tool that not many people know about. Control plus. That will enable the select more tool. And if you use Control plus, Control minus goes the other way, you can see that it's expanding out. So Control plus will just like select the next vertex along a chain, roughly speaking. And you can see we can very quickly select all the parts of the mesh that we don't need, right? Very cool. By the way, if Control plus doesn't work for you because you're on a laptop or something else, select more, less. You can also do it here. Anyways, to hide this part of the mesh, it's H. H for hide. So when you're in this state, it looks as though it's been deleted. It's very, sometimes you don't know where part of your mesh, and then you forgot that you've got hide turned on. If parts of your mesh are hidden and you want to bring it back, it's Alt-H. So H to hide and then Alt-H to bring it back. Or if you can't remember it for whatever reason, you can also find it. Okay, it's underneath mesh. There we go.
Mesh, yeah.
Mesh. Reveal hidden or hide selected. Okay, so that's the other way. But you can get my keyboard shortcut. It's in the link. It's free. Just use that and then you won't forget a lot of these handy shortcuts. All right, so now finally,
it's easier to remember the shortcuts than where stuff is located.
To explain, we can now take part of this mesh and drag it down, and it will work correctly. Haha. So now we get to now finally be an artist and go like, what sort of, edge or what sort of icing do I want to make this look like? So what I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm hitting G to pull it down, and then I'm just single middle click, and then because my cursor is closest to the Z-axis, it's now snapping it to the Z-axis. So that's why I mentioned before that it's really handy. You don't have to think of the letter and type it in. You just go in the general direction you want to go, and then just tap the middle click of the, which is your scroll wheel, right? Middle click. It's such a weird button that you have to call it out. It's the scroll wheel button, because it's like no other application seems to use it besides scrolling. But Blender is like, no, we're going to use it for like 90% of the operations is going to be middle click. But anyways, as you can see, I'm not paying particularly too much attention to it, but I'm just making a wavy looking shape around it. You might also want to make some bits that go the opposite direction, right? And then maybe pull, so you've got like big shapes as well as medium shapes and some small shapes. Big, medium, small. It's the recipe for appealing design. Big, medium, and small details. But I digress. By the way, I should mention, if you're stuck, don't feel bad, because there was certainly a lot of finickiness going on with this donut here, and we're definitely in the steep part of that curve at the moment. Do make use of my Discord if you are stuck. I created it literally so that people could get instantaneous help. I don't have any other benefit for it, so it's there so that you can find help. Link is in the description, and there's like donut help chat room where you can post screenshots of your problem and then people can help each other out. So do make use of that. Now, our shading issue here, this darkened edge, is actually going to fix itself by fixing another issue. So it's a two birds, one solution kind of problem. This 90-degree edge here for this icing, not ideal. Everybody knows that a real icing would create like a rounded edge there, right? So we can fix that just by adding another subsurf modifier. Because you might remember I mentioned, like, yes, if you've got 3 vertices, it'll create like another vertex here and another vertex here, but it'll also like round it out. It'll pull this one back, so you end up with a rounded corner. So right here in your modifier stack, we're going to go add modifier, generate subdivision surface. Now, the order of these does matter, okay? You want your solidifier at the top and the subdivision after it. So Blender works top to bottom, and it's important it's in this way because you want the extrusion to happen first, and then in order to round that edge, it has to happen as a secondary step. So solidify on top, subdivision underneath. Now, whilst we're here and we're looking at the close-up, nice little profile of this edge of this icing, another issue to call out, you can see it's got this this shape that goes around. Yes, so far so good, but then it goes up, and it's like, it would be better if it went around and then tucked in and touched the edge of it, because that would look more like real liquid wood. So we can solve that by just changing one of the settings in the solidify modifier. It's not one of those things that you would figure out or know where it is. It's just over time you learn where some of these settings are. But essentially here, the edge data. So we want to change the edge data to say that before you do the solidify step, add a crease on the inner part right here. If we increase this all the way to 1, it now creates a sharpened edge just on that inner part there. So the rest of it is a smoothed edge, but the middle one, there's a crease, so it's making a sharp edge there. And it just gives it's just a little bit more realism. Just looks a little bit closer to what you would imagine real icing would do. Okay, now for the cool bit. All right, so if you look at reference of donuts, right, yes, you've got these little wavy bits, but where the icing is really liquidy, it'll often break off from this wave here, and it'll create a trail that goes down underneath the donut, right? It just sort of drips all the way down. Whoops, bumped the microphone. So we can do that, but not the way we were doing it before. If we just took one of these points and then like dragged it all the way down like that, there wouldn't be enough information there, right? You can see you just get this like stretched look, and it doesn't look great, okay? So essentially we need to give it more information, and we couldn't just do it by like adding more and more subdivision surfaces. We need to actually like break this shape here and create a new shape that goes down. So we need to extrude. So if I select this vertex and then the one next to it by holding down Shift, I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, if you want to select 2 things at once, it's Shift select. Anyways, so if we select 2 vertices like that, we want to extrude it downward by hitting E. So when you tap E, it's similar to G in that you're in a placement state now, saying where do you want to place this? So I'm going to move it down to, yeah, like about there where I want the trail to stop, and I'm just going to do click, left click, and it's now placed it there. Now, it's hard to see it, but if I just switch to wireframe, you can see what it's doing. So it's created this breakaway shape here, an entirely new face that's completely separate to what we've got there currently. And what this means is if we go to object mode, you can see it's not just like continuing this form here, it's pulled it down, right? Which is exactly what we want. And in fact, I want it to go even further than that. So I'm going to select those 2 vertices, and I'm going to pull it down again. And then I'll do it again. And the reason I've done this 1, 2, 3 is that this detail here is important so that it conforms to the shape of the donut. Because if there's not enough, you're going to have that clipping issue that I showed you earlier. So that's pretty good. And now we're going to do it again. Originally in my earlier versions of the donut, I only did like 1 of these, but then I noticed that in the render, the final render, it's often the most interesting part of the donut. So now I'm thinking, yeah, just do it all the way around the donut. Just add the bit that looks cool. Add more of that. So here, so wherever there's essentially like a big dip is what I'm looking for. Like where the liquid would sort of build up and then like the surface tension there would be just too much and then it would break away. And it would go down underneath like that. And we'll do another one here, why not? Like that, and down, and down. And that's pretty good. Haha, lovely. So that concludes finally this heavy part of the tutorial. So if you are ready to watch the next part, hope you're not giving up. You can click there on the screen and I'll see you there. Make sure you hit subscribe as well if you haven't. A large number of you don't. But if you want to see more Blender tutorials, that's what you need to do. Self-promotion right there. Thanks guys. See you in the next part. Congrats, you didn't give up, you made it to part 4, you clicked on the next part of the video. There's always like less viewers each video as you go down. So you're here, well done, thumbs up. As you can tell by the title of this video, we're gonna learn about sculpting. But first, I should call out, if you have a problem with your mesh now, those problems can be amplified the further you go along. So it helps to do a technical check now, make sure you don't have any problems before we move along. So to look for it, go into edit mode. And first of all, by the way, if you can't see that middle part of your mesh, it's because you remember we temporarily hid it. So you can bring it back by hitting Alt-H, and that will bring back the rest of the mesh. And then we're looking for issues with the mesh, like right here. So this is a really common problem following this tutorial, because when you're projecting parts of the mesh, if it was like side on to the camera, it will project it that way, and then you can have like overlapping parts of the mesh. So that creates this artifact here, which will be exaggerated when we add more detail to it. So we just want to drag that back. So turn on snapping, and I'll keep proportional turned off, and then I'm just going to move this back over here just to move each of these points back. Another very common problem is you might have parts that have separated from your mesh. Now you can quickly fix this if you just like selected the point and then hit G to move it. When you're in that state, it's also snapping it to the mesh. Now you could do that all the way along, like select, tap G, then click, select, tap G, then click. But anybody's got time for that. Let's make Blender do the work for us. So there's a tool that's just designed for this, and it's called the Shrink Wrap Modifier. So over to our trusty modifier stack, we're gonna add yet another modifier. So add modifier. It's not under generate, it's under deform, which we haven't accessed before. New modifiers, ooh. The one we're looking for is Shrink Wrap. And first of all, hasn't done anything because it needs to know what the target is. What is the mesh that we're shrink wrapping our mesh to? So with this little eyedropper tool, you can see when you've clicked it, my cursor's changed to an eyedropper. And now if I hover over objects, I got the name of it. So I want to click on the object that is the donut, and now it's snapped to the donut and made it worse. Why, Andrew, would you make us do that? Remember, the order of your modifier stack matters. So the reason this happened is because we've done it after the solidify modifier. So it works top to bottom. We want the shrink wrap to happen before any of the extrusion happens. So now that it's there, it's correct. And this is what it looks like before, and this is after. And it's subtle, right? And you'll probably see this across your mesh, like little subtle changes where maybe it just separated off the mesh, which wasn't quite a perfect alignment, but this will just correct that. So great, we don't need this here now. We can just apply it because it was just a once-off operation, and now all our mesh should be perfectly flat. And assuming you haven't got any other issues going on, again, make sure you use my Discord. If you do have issues and you need someone to help, make use of the community. So use that and post your problem, and I'm sure people can help out. All right, so we want to do some sculpting. Now, why do we want to sculpt? Well, because if you look at reference photos of donuts with icing on them, you'll see that icing is obviously a liquid, and liquid does weird things. One of the weird things that it does is that it will pool in certain areas. It's not like a uniform amount all the way on it. So the most obvious being like at the end of this trail here, there would be more that now that it's there, it's correct. And this is what it looks like before, and this is after. And it's subtle, right? And you'll probably see this across your mesh, like little subtle changes where maybe it just separated off the mesh, which wasn't quite a perfect alignment, but this will just correct that. So great, we don't need this here now. We can And first of all, hasn't done anything because it needs to know what the target is. What is the mesh that we're shrink wrapping our mesh to? So with this little eyedropper tool, you can see when you've clicked it, my cursor's changed to an eyedropper. And now if I hover over objects, I got the name of it. So I want to click on the object that is the donut, and now it's snapped to the donut and made it worse. Why, Andrew, would you make us do that? Remember, the order of your modifier stack matters. So the reason this happened is because we've done it after the solidify mod. So if it works top to bottom, we want the shrink wrap to happen before any of the extrusion happens. So now that it's there, it's correct. And this is what it looks like before, and this is after. And it's subtle, right? And you'll probably see this across your mesh, like little subtle changes where maybe it just separated off the mesh, which wasn't quite a perfect alignment, but this will just correct that. So great, we don't need this here now. We can just apply it because it was just a once-off operation, and now all our mesh should be perfectly flat. And assuming you haven't got any other issues going on, again, make sure you use my Discord. If you do have issues and you need someone to help, make use of the community. So use that and post your problem, and I'm sure people can help out. All right, so we want to do some sculpting. Now, why do we want to sculpt? Well, because if you look at reference photos of donuts with icing on them, you'll see that icing is obviously a liquid, and liquid does weird things. One of the weird things that it does is that it will pool in certain areas. It's not like a uniform amount all the way on it. So the most obvious being like at the end of this trail here, there would be more that would accumulate at the end there. And I think the reason for it is that because it's a viscous fluid, once it runs out of enough fluid, there's not enough to kind of push it forward, but there's enough for it to build up. So you would have like a buildup here on each of these ends, but you would also have buildups all along the edge. And you can see it in reference photos. Like here, we've got this like clear, was it like a glaze? And basically the areas there where it looks whiter, that's a thickened area. So we essentially want to replicate that across our donut. So we can't do that currently. Like if you go into edit mode, we don't have any mesh to work with because the extrusion, the thickened part is happening via this modifier. So we need to make the modifier real. So again, we're just going to apply it. Drop down, apply. Now in edit mode, we have that part of the mesh to work with. So we could, if you wanted to, come in here and like select the points that you want to add, you know, a bulge to, and then very carefully come in and tap G, and then, oh, I've got snapping turned on, turn that off. Pull this out, right? And go like that and go, yep, there's a little bulge there, but that's very tedious to first select a point, then tap a key to move it. It's very tedious. So that's really like, you just need to use another tool to do the job. So edit mode is one tool, and it's good for like very precise things when you need to get precise things, but for more like organic shapes, more freehand stuff, that's where sculpting comes in. So at the top here, we've just been flipping between object and edit mode, but the one underneath it is sculpt mode. So when we go into that mode, you'll see that we have on the left-hand side all of these tools that appear. And I mean, this isn't a sculpting like tutorial, really. We're just really going to scratch the surface, but they do different things, different sculpting things. Like let's just use the default tool here. Can't really see much happening. Let's just turn up the strength and the size of it. Like it just pulls out that part of it. And even that quick little one stroke, imagine if you had to select each of those points and pull them out one by one. Like that's why this tool is the appropriate tool for this kind of job, right? Because it's very quickly going to enable us to add lots of complex shape. Very cool. So the tool that we're looking for is actually, it's this one, the inflate brush, which is just conveniently the I hotkey, inflate. By the way, if you want to change the size of brushes in Blender, I mean, you've got these ones here. You've also got the strength slider here, but there is a hotkey just to change the size of the brush with F. So F to change the size of the brush, and you just pull out with your cursor to make it bigger, and then pull in to reduce it, and then do a single left click to confirm. You can also change the strength with Shift F. So Shift F, pull out, click, and then Shift F, pull in, click. Anyways. So if I was to draw on this, you can see that I'm inflating that edge. I could also inflate here, but you very quickly realize, like, look at that. Look at that. What is that, right? The eye is going to see that. It's a pro tip. Your eye is like, if you're going low res, don't go low res for things that are round, because your eye is very quickly going to spot low poly things. Actually, just last night I was playing Spider-Man, the Miles Morales one, and there was like this coffee cup that was on a table, and then you walk, and it looks fine, like as a background asset, but then part of it, the mission, you had to go up and read something on the table, and you had to get close to this coffee cup, and it was like 8 vertices. It just looked like almost looked like a nut on a wheel of a car, right? Just like that jagged. So anyways, what I'm saying is this is a rounded form, so we need more information. We need more detail to sculpt on. The reason this is jagged and the reason there's not enough detail here is that just even though we have a subsurf modifier, a subdivision modifier, it's applying it after we do the sculpt mode. So when you're in sculpt mode, it's still just using your raw mesh here, and then it does this as a secondary step. So if we want to sculpt into this detail, we need to apply this. So I'm going to use more than one. I'm going to use 2 because I want to have even more detail. So importantly, by the way, if you're applying a subdivision modifier, even though you've got 2 levels here, it will always use just the viewport. So your render amount here could be whatever, but when you hit apply, it's just going to apply whatever is in the viewport. So I'm going to go 2 levels and hit apply. Now look at this. We have 16 times the detail because we had level 1, which would be 4x, a 4x multiply, and then 4x of 4x, 16. So we have 16 times the vertices to play with. So now when we go into sculpt mode, look at it now. When we sculpt, look at that. So much more room to work with and much more fun. So now that I'm in that state, I'm going to just do little circles with this brush on each of these points here. And the reason I'm doing like little circles like this is that by default, the stroke state is, what is it, space. You can switch.
He wants that pooling on it. The major problem that I see with having this mini subdivision is in certain locations where you don't need that level of detail, stuff like this, our face count goes through the roof. Like absolutely through the roof. Typically for something like this, like you don't need, like here's with the solidify, we're at 50k triangles. My avatar has about like 4 times this, and it's a whole avatar, and we're just doing a donut. So I can kind of see why a lot of people criticize how freely he's using subdivision to add geometry and stuff like that. I'm curious if he's going to go into retopo, because at this rate, the donut is going to be super unusable. Just because of the amount of triangles. Like, it'll be fine for one render, but for anything else, it's a little too much.
And then that enables you to just kind of continue adding more pressure as you move your mouse. So a little circle like that. And there you go. Very quickly, already we have a more interesting looking shape across it. So another brush, another tool, I guess you call it. Is it a brush or is it? I think these technically are called brushes. But anyways, another one that you use all the time is grab. And conveniently, it's the hotkey G. And what this does is just like pushing clay with your finger. It's like, It's really cool. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm actually just exaggerating the design. Because that is what makes appealing design. It's exaggerating the addition and subtraction that you see in a shape, even though in the real world you might not see this like tapered thing like that. Because it's got this bulbous end, you want to draw more attention to that kind of globule at the end there. And to do that, yeah, if you just make this a little bit tapered using this tool, it can do that. And we get to learn about a new tool in Blender, which is the whole point of this tutorial. So, yeah. All right, pull this around, Just click and drag. I could change the shape, size of the brush with F, and you've got more time than me, so maybe make this better than what I'm doing really quickly, but just get, generally a shape like that, and it should look a little nicer. Okay, so now let's do that raised edge all the way around the rim of this. this. Now, in previous versions of this tutorial, I said just use the inflate brush and then just like draw across it. The problem with this is that this is so imprecise, and you can accidentally like draw over another bit, and then you look at it side on and you get these like noticeable like divots across the donut. And it's not very, it's very hard to do because you keep like accidentally clicking off it and then on it, and you get this like jagged, like dig, 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 dig. It's not very appealing, the point is. So let's go back. We can learn about another tool. It's another excuse to learn about another tool, and that tool is called the mask tool. So it's actually in the list here, but I never remember what it is. It's just hit M for mask, and it's this one. And what this enables you to do is, if you just draw on it, you get this grayed shape, right? And then when you're using another tool, like say you switch to the inflate brush now, and if you draw over this, let me just increase this. Yeah, if you drew over this, you can see it's applying an inflation to everything except the area that is dark. And that's how you can create like, you know, a skin lesion on a zombie or something like that. So a mask is very useful in sculpting, used a lot. And we're going to use it in just this case. What we're going to do is mask out just this area along the rim there. And then we're going to apply a constant inflate value to just the area that we've masked. So first use the mask tool. Mask. And it doesn't really make sense to use like a half opaque mask. So we're going to set the strength all the way to 1. And then I'll use a brush size about here. So essentially, where do I want the inflation? Like, do I want this much inflation on the rim? No, probably something about here. And then I'm just going to paint a darkened value all the way across it. I just want to make sure that it's, you know, fairly even. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but fairly even across it. And I obviously don't want it to be in this part because that, you know, the liquid has flowed all the way down and it's broken the trail and it's gone down there. So I don't want any raised area there. And again, I apologize if this was like tedious, but it's a way to learn Blender piece by piece. Okay. Hey, speaking of which, I forgot. With the sculpt tools in Blender, for whatever reason, it has assumed by default
Crank up this strength.
you might want to sculpt on the other side of your mesh. So you can see I've got this smear here, and that's because somewhere I was painting over here, I went through the mesh and it painted on the other side of the mesh over there. Very annoying. So I can undo it. It's just easier than like repainting that whole thing. And what you want to do with your mask tool is underneath brush, set it to front faces only. And that means when you paint, it should mean that as you draw, it could still happen, just be careful.
Sure.
But it should happen less. It shouldn't happen like on the opposite side of the same mesh. Anyways, it should happen less. By the way, I didn't call it out.
The reason why it's doing that is because you have Solidify, which Solidify actually adds an additional layer. If you have front faces on, what's going to happen is, so let's go ahead and hide our torus. So it's going to paint through regardless, right? So when we go through here and I paint here, you'll see that it's there. It doesn't matter what you do because you have a Solidify. So when you paint on one side of the face, and then the Solidify modifier is going to go, okay, that spot is it's painted. Therefore, it's going to duplicate over. It doesn't matter what you do. Like you have a Solidify that's duplicating that for you. It's doing exactly what you're telling it to do. I think what he's trying to talk about is backface. So backface culling, such as like back here, you're not going to ever see any of this. So what's going to end up happening is one of the very easy ways to optimize is like come back here, delete like this edge path right here, and then maybe like one right here, and then you can delete like thousands of faces easily, right? It's just an easy way because you're never going to see that. You're never going to ever see that. But it's like simple optimizations. Now, there's always two sides of a face. There's the outside and inside. Inside will be, or what is known as the back face. You'll never see anything on it in most programs unless back face calling is on. And so when you do front face only on the paint, that back area won't see anything. But this is technically a front face. That's what Solidify does. So
it's not essential, but if you do ever want to isolate and only see the selected object, / is the isolation mode. So / on the number pad or the actual normal keyboard will pull you in and out of that state. Anyway, so now with the mask brush, with front faces only enabled, I can paint along it, and it should happen less, essentially. All right, I don't know what to say, but this doesn't take long once you've set it up. And assuming you've got the strength of 1, by the way, you don't want to have areas with like half opaque, right? Because we want to have a constant value across it as we inflate it. And we should get a nice raised edge that goes all the way along the donut. Okay, great. Just clean it up if you've got any areas that look a little untidy, a little unkempt.
Kempt? Unkept?
Yep. Awesome. All right. So, as I mentioned, the mask will actually mask out the area, so you can't paint on it. We obviously want to only paint on the area that we mask.
Control I.
Invert it by just hitting Control I, same hotkey as Photoshop, etc. And then, obviously, if we went to the inflate brush and then we just painted, like, yes, we're only now painting onto that area, but it also doesn't solve our problem of like different values across it. So we want to apply a uniform inflation on just these areas. So there is a tool in the Sculpt tools called, where is it? Mesh Filter. So I will be honest, it's probably the laziest implementation of a tool in Blender. Like, mesh filters, they're not really well documented. You kind of have to just learn how they work. But unlike all these other brushes here, the way this one works is it's applying a uniform value to the entire mesh. So it doesn't actually matter where you click on the mesh, it's going to apply it. And it's applying what is in the filter types listed here. So if I just click, this is the other thing you have to learn. If I drag to the right, I'm inflating. If I drag to the left, I'm deflating and sort of subtracting the opposite direction. You just kind of have to learn that that's how this specific tool works. My theory is, by the way, to go on a rant, ZBrush's user experience and interface is so arcane, so badly hodgepodge together from ideas over the last 2 decades. They never had any thought in the process. They just lumped it all in there. And Blender's sculpting tools competes with that. So they're like, hey, yeah, the filter tools, yeah, they're not the easiest to understand, but at least we're not ZBrush. That's my theory. It's my working theory I'm going with. But anyways, point is now that we're in this, you could see we're applying a uniform value to everything. Hooray for us. I might also, I'm going to set the strength of this to 0.1, and that just means that as I move the cursor, it's applying less of a value for the movement, so I can use smaller movements.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, is this is a little like, it almost looks, if we go into object mode, it looks like a tube almost around the edge of it. It's not very nice. It basically, the edge that we've got here is too hard, so we can smooth out that edge by using mask, smooth mask. Okay. Now, if we use the inflate, just to the right a little bit, I'm just going to go with that. Let's go object mode and see how that looks. That's pretty good. I might actually go just a little bit more, just exaggerate it slightly more. There we go. Great. So, yeah, that's roughly it. Now, there's a little bit of artifacting there because the way the mask works is it's kind of that feathering thing. It's not very exact, and it's kind of got some values in between it. So we can smooth that out in sculpt mode by, first of all, just clearing the mask and then using the smooth tool. By default, it's too high, so just turn it down. And I'm just going to smooth that edge, and that'll just sort of clear up some of this artifacting. It's a little too high. For whatever reason, the smooth tool, which also you can access at any point when you're in sculpt mode just by holding down shift, and it'll temporarily invoke the smooth tool, and it'll use the value that is on the smooth tool. So you'll be in this mode, and then you hold down shift, and it'll actually not use this value, but the value that's on the smooth tool. Again, ZBrush is the competitor, so some things are a little weird here. Anyways, so it's a little too high. Just turn it down. Now we've got a nice value. And I'm just smoothing this out just to clear up some of the artifacting all the way around the mesh. Ba-doop, boop, boop. And that's it. Lovely. Hey, if you've made it this far, 3D is in the cards. It's for you because we've done some fairly complex things. So if you're a beginner and you're just getting started in Blender, congrats, because it is a steep learning curve, but you have learned some very complex modeling and some sculpting. So congrats, you've made it this far. Why not continue on the series? Click here to see the next video, and I will see you in that part.
I think what would be nice is, so one of the things with sculpting, yeah, I mean, it is an introduction. What's really nice about sculpting is you can do a lot of details, a lot of like little details in a short amount of time. So his is very smooth. If you look at mine, it's very glumpy. It looks like it's just tossed on or whatever. Probably would need to clean up these edges more if I was going to be a little bit more serious about it. But I think he could have gone through and say like, hey, get crazy with the with some of these tools, right? Go ahead and start, say, adding, you know, imperfections to it, because it just adds another layer to it.
This is where we finished at the end of the last part, and we are ready for some materials. Before we continue, do a check over though, because I looked inside my donut and I saw this, which shouldn't be here, obviously. So make sure you don't have any hidden meshes that should definitely not be there. You've only got your camera, your donut, your icing, and your light, okay? Okay, so materials. Let's do some materials. If we jumped into our render mode, that little button that I showed you on the first part that takes you into rendered view mode, you can see we've got a lamp and it's lighting our donut in a very depressing, cold gray. So let's give it a material.
Yeah.
Down here, the little material tab, and then we're gonna hit new. So just like before, the one thing we're going to change is the color. Let's make it a nice pink color. And that looks pretty good. The other value that you typically want to change for a lot of objects is...
This is kind of a pet peeve for me. The moment you make a material, name it.
The roughness value. So you can see the further I go all the way to the left-hand side, the more it becomes a mirror. So all the way at 0 is basically a mirror. And then all the way to the right is your like most porous object, like a brick or something like that. Basically something that looks like it doesn't have a reflection, although everything does. The roughness is just merely dissipating that reflection everywhere, so it appears as though it doesn't. But anyways, so we're going to go with like a 0.3, something like that. It's pretty good. And then for the base of our donut, we're going to give it another material, and let's go with a nice orangey yellow, which we will change later on, so it won't matter anyway. But that's good. Great. Look at us. We've got a donut. By the way, we'll add some subsurface SSS later on to make this look a little bit more milky, but for now this is good. Now we want to put our donut onto a marble countertop. So first of all, we need that countertop as a separate object. So Shift A, and the one we're looking for is again under mesh, and we're going to go with a plane. So a plane is just a square that's literally made up of 4 vertices. It's the simplest object, but the most versatile, that you use it all over the place. And I'm gonna make this look a little bit bigger. So let's just scale that out with S and then click. Okay, so we wanna make our donut rest onto the countertop. So if I selected my donut base and moved it up, well, there's a problem, right? We need to have both of these move together. So if you wanna have one object basically attached to another object while still being its own separate object, you parent it. So the way we parent it is, first of all, you select the object that you want to follow the other object, so the child, and then you select the parent. So Holding down Shift, I'm going to now click on the donut base, and then to parent, it's Control P. Okay. Or again, if at any time you don't know what it is, just hit F3 for search, and then we can just type in parent. Now, by the way, with parent, you get a number of options here. The one you actually want is keep transform. If you just do object, it means if you've ever moved the object like off its base or whatever like that, it'll then like clear its position. So it's actually not the one you want most of the time. So it's keep transform. Now that I've done that, if you've done it in the correct order, you should be able to select the base and then move it, and the icing should go with it. If it doesn't, it means it's probably parented the other way. So again, make sure the object you want to follow, the other one, is selected first, and then the parent is selected last. Okay. So now I'm going to move that up along its z-axis. So G, and then just middle tap and pull it up till it's resting on my counter. Haha, lovely. Don't worry about this looking like cartoonishly bad in terms of realism. I'm going to show you a button later on, which is just going to make this look phenomenally realistic. That's going to be in some later parts. But for now, this is fine just whilst we work and piece the scene together. So for our countertop here, we need to give it a new material. And then underneath the base color, you can select not just a color by clicking the color, but the little dot next to it, that little yellow thing doesn't look like a button. It is. If you click that, you get this this pop-up or pop-down in this point, which just gives you a number of options. And the one that we're looking for is image texture. So essentially, it's replacing that import from a flat color to an image texture property. And it's now black, and it's asking you what image texture. So we need an image texture. Now we could go to just Google Images and just find any old marble texture, download that. The problem usually with textures on the web is that what most people call a texture is not ideal for 3D. Most textures are good for websites, but for 3D, we need extra information to tell the 3D software how the material property looks. Like, how does it reflect light? What do the bumps look like across the surface? And all that information is never available on these sites. So to find those textures, you have to go to a separate dedicated website. And the website that I recommend is Polygon. And the reason I recommend it is because it's mine. It's my website. That's why I recommend it. No, I started it 8 years ago because I was pretty dissatisfied with the quality of the texture websites that were available at the time. So I used my YouTube money to invest in a team and some high-tech equipment. We went out into the world and we scanned stuff to a very high quality standard. And over the years, we've grown it to include models and HDRIs as well. And obviously a lot of this stuff is paid, but we also have a free range. And obviously we're going to be using a free texture for this part. So this is the free texture. This is the one we're going to use. And first of all, although it is free, you do need to sign up for an account. So you can just sign up with Google. That's usually the easiest one. It's a couple of onboarding questions. I would like to actually know how you, are you a professional? Are you a student? That's kind of interesting to me to know that. And then when you get to here, you're just going to say continue with free account. But power through that. And if you click the link in the description, again, this is the marble, and we just want to hit download. And you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, it's downloading. It is a large size, but this is because it's 8K, and we've got maps at like 16-bit depth to get all of that accurate information there. But once it is finished, it'll just appear in your downloads. Then you just unzip the zip file as you would normally, and then finally, you should see some glorious high-resolution images and ones with extra information like roughness. Very, very subtle, but will come through when we do the render. So,
sure, let's go ahead and let's get that set up. So, Polygon is his little thing. I'm gonna take this split off. Don't need to dox myself. And then sign up for free download. Okay. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh my god, enough of the clicks. Too many clicks, bro. I Jesus, relax. That was a lot of clicks, bro. Bro. That was that. What? Like 12 clicks in. Was not what he showed in the video at all. What the man? Okay, so whenever I do signups and stuff like that, I want it to be as seamless as possible, and that's why like a lot of people will sign up with their Gmail accounts because they're trying to eliminate a lot of the extra steps, such as re-entering their name, doing the all that other shenanigans and stuff like that. Um, every single additional click becomes a chore, and even though it's just one click or whatever, it's still additional clicks. It's still obnoxious. It's better to have, it be as streamlined as possible, because someone who's downloading or who's trying to use your website as a resource, they're going to remember that. Even though you only have to do those clicks once, the fact is, when you introduce your program like that and you provide all that, it just becomes that your website gets a stereotype. That's why, like, okay, this is like super meta, irrelevant to, Blender or whatever. Google found that if you introduce clicks, right, it is way better to do fewer clicks over a long, like, to do few clicks over long periods of time where you can get actually more data from someone than it is to try and cram it all down someone's throat initially, right? It's the boiling the crab effect. If you start it off in cold water and then you slowly crank up the heat, the crab doesn't know it's getting cooked. So it becomes a lot easier. But if you put the crab in the hot water, it's not going to trust your pot anymore, bro. Like, you got to make it streamlined. That was too much. Okay, I mean, it's free resource. It is what it is.
Into Blender, where we've got that image texture, we're going to click on open. Then navigate to where you unzipped it, and then just click on the one that ends with COL in the name, and then just hit open. And here it is. Okay, and it looks great up close. Only problem is, of course, look at that reflect.
So I'm going to do something that's a little bit more advanced, since we already went and added a material to this. I'm actually going to, I believe it's Shift T. No, Control Shift T? What was it? Oh man, I forgot what it was. I could have swore it was Control T. Is it not? Hold on one second. I could have swore it was Control T. Mm-hmm. Let me add shortcut. Shift Z? No. That changes the wireframe and stuff. Oh, Node Wrangler. Okay, hold on. My bad. My bad. My bad. Node Wrangler. I'll add all these too. Okay. Now Shift T. Control Shift T. Or Control T. Yeah, there we go. And this is like a way better way of doing all your setups and stuff like that. You used to be able to just You used to open a file. This is a little interesting. Because it used to be able to just open up a file and then you could highlight all of them and it would import it all. And then it would all be preset based on the names. So instead, now I'm going to have to go with something like this, right? This is technically an image texture for some reason. Why? This is metallic. It should be under metal. I guess we'll just follow his guide or whatever. So I'll go ahead and do open downloads quartz, and then it should be the, is it sphere? No, yeah. Hold on. Why it's all called metalness? View large icons. So it's actually called the cool AK metalness.
So bland, so fake. And as I mentioned before, fake is the enemy, and you need to squash it by just adding variance. So that's where our roughness map is going to come in. And while we could try to add it in here, this section on the right-hand side, it's actually not where you do most of your material work, because this is kind of like a simplified, dumbed-down version. It doesn't really... It gets a little bit complicated when you try and add too many things to it, because there's like too many menus and drop-downs and all that kind of stuff. So instead, if you go to your shading tab at the top of the screen there, this will change the layout of the screen to something completely different we haven't seen before. And lots of windows, actually too many. I never actually need this one on the right-hand side. So where you just mouse over where you've got the divider and then just right-click and then say join areas. And then you want to join it to the left to close it. And then I'll do the same here, because I've never needed those on the left-hand side. So I've just got my view at the top here and then this one here. And the reason, by the way, this looks different than what we had before is because this is the material preview, but you can change it back to what we had before by clicking that. So material preview, by the way, it's the same. It's a rendered mode, but it's using lights, a different light setup. Basically, just an HDRI, which is like a fake kind of light and reflection map, just so that you can quickly preview materials. And really, you could use either or. They both kind of show the material, but yeah, let's use this one. Okay, but the bit that we're looking for is here. So this section here is your node setup, and it's actually an exact duplicate of what we did over here, because this on the right hand side is the simplified version. If you're just doing like a quick change, you might want to use this, but over here, this is what's actually happening to it underneath the hood, right? So you can see as I change this on the right hand side, that is also changing there. So they are linked. So the way nodes work is basically a left to right function. So we start over here with our image texture, it goes into our shader, which is the material for this plane, and then it comes out into a material output, and that's what is fed into the final shader. So essentially we could do anything, like for example, and this is one of the value of nodes, is between these two nodes, we could add another node. Like for example, I could hit Shift A to add, again, same hotkey, works everywhere. And then I could add in like a hue saturation value node. And then I could change the hue of my marble to look blue, right? Or something else. So that's the power of nodes, and you could just keep going, adding in adjustments and everything you want. So nodes, very, very flexible. They do look daunting because they get all these like, you know, squid-looking lines going everywhere. But it's very, very convenient, very customizable. Okay, but we want to add something to our roughness so that we don't have a flat single value roughness, which is what that is currently. We want to use that map that we just downloaded. So one, you could hit Shift A and then add an image text this way, but actually we could also just drag out from that input there and then just do a release, and it'll now say, what do you want to add in this input? And we could type in image texture color and then hit enter. Then here, go to that same place that we unzipped it, and then we're looking for the one with roughness in the name. So roughness in the name, and then hit open. Okay,
or
so
you just drag it in.
Better, right? You can kind of see we've got some detail there, but it doesn't look quite right. Something is not going right. It's because when you add an image texture, Blender doesn't really know what type of information it is yet. And by default, it's looking at the color information, even though there isn't really color there. So instead, we need to tell Blender, this is a special map, and we're just looking at the values, right? So essentially, the color space here, we need to change it from sRGB, where it's a standard photo color, to instead non-color data, or just non-color, I guess they've changed it. But now you can see that looks correct, right? So look at all that. We got scratches, we got smudges. It's infinitely more realistic than what we had previously. So beyond that though, we could also add in little tiny bumps, okay? So bumps are in a place you would not expect. There's not a bump value here. It's actually under normal.
Normal,
so
yeah.
Normal, you hear that word a lot in 3D. It just basically means the face, which direction is the face pointing, right? So if this is your face of the plane, you're pointing this way, that's the normal, right? But you can change the normal information to kind of tweak it to pretend like there is detail in that, okay? Essentially, we can plug in a specialized map called a normal map. Okay, so we're going to drag out from that normal map and then release, and then image texture. That's the last use thing. That's the one we want. I'm just going to click color, then drop, and then hit open. Go to that same folder, and then this is the one, the purple one. It's the weirdest looking map. You always know you're looking at a CG texture map directory because it's the purple one, and it's got NRM in the name for normal. And hit open. And just like before, it's not going to be correct because it thinks this is a color image texture, just like for photos. So we need to change it again to non-color data. And now you would think that would fix it, but no, it looks even worse. What did we do? The problem is we need to convert this image texture into something this can read. So we need to put another node in between here. So the node is found under Shift A for add, then vector normal map. So click and then just drop it here so it highlights between it, and then just drop it. And it will now finally be correct. And if I go full screen with control space, I didn't mention that before, but yeah, control space, and then you can go full screen, and you can see we've got very subtle little chips and divots across the texture along with those smudges, and it just looks way more believable. It means you don't have to worry about this part of your scene. It's just going to work, and you're going to get all that detail for free, and just makes life a little bit easier. But it is a lot of work. Like, what you've just made is a PBR shader, and yeah, it's a lot of work. All those little maps and everything, and having to know which setting is which. But it is a very common thing to learn, so that's why I wanted to include it in here. If I could plug my own website again, though, I will say we did hear you, because a lot of people say that. So we actually made an add-on called the Polygon add-on, which I'll actually show you how to install later on, because that is actually important for 3D, because you use a lot of add-ons. But to plug it very quickly, it actually does all of that without you having to leave Blender. So it'll download the texture for you. There we go. See, it's downloading. It's actually faster through the add-on. And then once you've got it, you just hit apply, and then it will do all of that node work for you in the background, and it'll just apply it to the mesh for you. So you don't have to do all that all the time. And in fact, most people, I think, if you're working on big scenes, you're using libraries, you're using add-ons like this, so you don't have to do it all manually all the time. But it is important to know the process, so that's why I wanted to show it. But anyways, this was our material, and we are happy with it. Well done. Let's go back to the layout tab, and now we're going to do one more thing. So you see our donut base here. Let's just isolate this donut for one moment here by hitting /, which I mentioned previously. Okay, when you're in /, this is isolate mode, which means it's literally turning off everything, including the lamp, which is why it's dark. But if you turn on material preview, then you get this. So this is okay. But if you look at real references of donuts, you'll see that it's typically
Glazy
around the middle. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, the way it cooks, right? It's only like half submerged, and then it's flipped. And it means that the bits that are closest to the surface are cooked less. So there's usually like a whiter part around the rim. And I mean, really, this is just an excuse to show you another part of Blender, which is texture paint. So at the top there, click the texture paint tab. And again, let's go into isolate mode.
Sure.
Donut there. Why are we not seeing? Okay, there we go. So what texture paint does is it lets you paint directly onto your mesh. But if we try doing it, you can see nothing's happening. And it does give you a warning at the bottom, missing textures detected. So to paint, you're painting into an image, and the image doesn't exist yet. So we have to give it one. So go to the Material tab, and then here where we got base color, we set it up as yellow, but we're actually just going to override it now. So click that little yellow dot again, and then say Image Texture. So now it's black, doesn't have an image. So, and instead of clicking Open, we're going to click New. So we're going to be creating a brand new image, and let's call this Donut Base. We could make this higher res if we want, but don't. This is more than enough for a donut base. That's fine. And this will just save us time. The color, this will just fill the it'll fill the image for us with a flat color. So we're just going to go for something pretty similar to what we had before, a nice yellowy color like that. And by the way, make sure you're all the way bright, otherwise your donut is going to be a little bit dark. So yeah, there we go. All right,
yeah, that's the point of making chocolate.
And once we've done that, you should, I mean, it should be over there on the left-hand side, but if it doesn't pop up, you can just select it from the drop-down donut base, and there we go. So now we're in this state. Look what I can do. Ooh.
Oh, fancy.
So,
Yeah. Old people, man.
But we can paint directly onto our mesh. So to understand this, because it's kind of weird, you can also paint directly over here. And you might be thinking like, well, how does it know, like, how do I know which part over here is actually going to be painted over onto the donut there? You might not care, but it's actually good to understand how it works. So basically this mesh here, it has to be unwrapped over onto this left-hand side here, because that's the only way to have a 2D texture, 2D flat image be applied to a mesh is to unwrap it in some way. I mean, there's projection. I'm not getting into that.
Yeah.
To unwrap it. And unwrapping is essentially like, there is a meme actually that explains it. But if you have like a chocolate, right, that is wrapped in some tinfoil, if you flatten it out, that is essentially UV unwrapping. There are little places in that wrapping where there had to be a cut, right? And then that cut was wrapped around the object. That's what UV unwrapping is. So the reason this works for us is because the cuts are actually already in place for default objects. So this torus is already perfectly UV unwrapped, so we don't have to do anything. I did want to mention it though, because it's important to understand UV unwrapping. Anyways, so we could actually paint directly on here, as I mentioned. White is a little bit too extreme though. So I'm going to click that and choose a color. First of all, I'm going to select the eyedropper and then not click over here because that's got shading information. I'm going to click on the left-hand side so we get the exact color. And then I'm going to make it closer to white. So not fully white because that'll be too far, but closer to white. And I'm also going to change the strength of my brush. I'll make about halfway. And then now I can do paints across it. And this will enable you to get a much more natural feel because you'll have, just like, in fact, I might even go a little bit softer. And that way you can kind of just paint across it. And this is very forgiving because we've got icing that's going to go over the top of it. But that's good. We don't want it to be too extreme. Let's just make it, I might go the other way. Make this a little bit more saturated. Anyways, that's basically all we need to do. We just want to just dab our toes into the field of texture painting. I would say texture painting, by the way, it's one of the weaker areas of Blender. It's actually due for an update at some point in the future. But it doesn't do like, you can't paint into like the height information or the roughness information at the same time like you can with Substance Painter. But it's got basic functionality. Now, importantly, this is an image, but it's not saved into your blend file. It still needs to be manually saved. So see at the top left-hand corner there, it's got image with a star. If you see that star, it means you've got changes that haven't been saved. So we need to go image and then save and specify where are we going to put our image. Because if we don't do this, we're going to lose it. So it has to be saved somewhere. So I'm just going to save it, anywhere. It has to be saved somewhere because it will not be saved as part of the blend file. Very important.
Where's the smudge? Soften.
You've done. But there we go. So now to bring back everything, remember if it looks like, where's the rest of my scene gone? See the top left-hand corner? Local means it's isolated mode. So that means you just have to hit / again, and it brings back everything. And there we are. So that's the extent of this part of the tutorial. As I mentioned, some of you might be wondering, when are we going to make that lovely subsurface scattering? We're going to do that in the future after we do the sprinkles because it's too hard to see at this point. So There we go, guys. Join me in the next part, and I'll see you there.
There we go. Looks good. Okay, we can unhide everything.
The time has finally come to decorate our delicious looking donut with some sprinkles. So the feature we need for that is called Geometry Nodes.
Delicious.
Top of your screen. If you don't see it, just middle mouse drag across, and you'll see the tab Geometry Nodes. So it's adjusted your screen.
Oh God.
Don't get disorientated. Your donut is still there. This screen on the left here, it's called the spreadsheet. Never needed it. Touch on wood, never will. So we can just close that. Right click, join areas, and then just collapse it into it. Okay. So with your icing selected, click the new button. So welcome to the world of Geometry Nodes. So Geometry Nodes is actually a modifier. So when we hit new there, we've added in a modifier called Geometry Nodes. And what the modifier is doing is whatever we want it to. Okay. So what this section down here is, this is a
I actually haven't worked with this before, so I'm pretty interested.
And it's the exact same type of system that was used in our materials, right? But it's a completely different system. Okay, so the same nodes will not be referenced between the completely different systems. So the way this works is our mesh that we've got here of our icing is what is being represented on the left-hand side with your input. It's then taking that mesh and it's feeding it all the way to the right, and it's going to spit out whatever is in your group output. So currently, nothing has changed because there's nothing between those points. But if I was, for example, don't follow me, but just as an example, if I was to add a set position node, drop this in here, and then change the position of the icing along the Z axis, you can see it's raised it. Okay, now the mesh is still there. The mesh has not changed. So we're not actually moving the object. This is just happening after the fact via a modifier. Okay, now obviously this would be a rather pointless use for Geometry Nodes to move it, because you could just move it. But as an example, let's say, I don't know, you had a scene where lots of objects, some of them are raised, some of them are not, and you wanted to quickly change them. What you could do with Geometry Nodes, in this case, you could actually expose this offset value by dragging it to the left over here. And when you do that, you can see it's now appeared over here in our modifier stack. What that means is whenever I'm in another part of Blender, say I'm like building stuff, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I need to quickly, change the height of that icing, I've got it there whenever I need to. So essentially, this system enables you to build your own tool that does something that you want it to do in a really flexible way. So it's really powerful. And before Geometry Nodes, I mean, Blender was kind of limited in what you can do, but I'll throw some examples here. But in the last 2 years since it's been in Blender, people have done some wild stuff with it. And most of this stuff really was just not possible in Blender before without doing custom scripting. So it's really opened up the doors. So it is a very different system, like it's a different way of working than just hands-on in 3D, but it's a really flexible, really valuable system. So any time spent learning Geometry Nodes, I think, is time well spent. So we want to do sprinkles, and to do that we need to first of all scatter some points onto our mesh. So to do that, hit Shift A for add, and then for point, distribute points on faces. Okay, and then it's just it's just going to put you in a placement state. And if you just mouse over that line there till it lights up, if you click, it's going to automatically connect it for you. And now you can see we've got points on our icing and a density value. Great. But you might notice the icing has actually disappeared. Ooh. Now the reason for that is we've told it, okay, take that icing object and convert it into points, and then just give us the points back. Okay, so what we need to do is say, yes, we want the points, but we also want the original mesh. So we can do that by adding in a node that you use all the time, which is Shift A, Geometry, Join Geometry. So you'll find this node in probably any Geometry Nodes tutorial. Very versatile. So drop it in here after the points, and you'll notice this input here is a different shape. So normally inputs are circles or triangles or whatnot. This one is a long and elongated shape to signify that it can accept multiple inputs. So unlike these where you can only accept one, this can accept many. So what we need to do is take the output of our original mesh and then feed it over to here. And now we have both the original mesh and we have our points, and they're being combined together and then put into our output. Okay, very cool, awesome. All right, so if we were to give this a render,
Interesting.
you would actually see nothing because these points don't physically exist. They just exist.
They don't have anything. They're just designated locations.
You have to tell it what do you want to render them as. So for that, we need to add an object to be our sprinkle. So your sprinkle could be whatever you want. We're actually going to make two different types of sprinkles in this donut series. So we're going to start though with a very simple one, just a round ball. So just like you would add another object normally, Shift A, and then go Mesh, and then go UV Sphere. Now, this sphere is going to be referenced for every single sprinkle. Okay, so we want to go as low res as we can get away with. So I'm going to go with 12 segments and then 8 rings. If you're on a really slow computer, and this is really going to suffer later on, you could go even lower, but I don't want to go too low.
Sure, I'll go 12 and 8.
That jagged edge, because it's a rounded form, so I don't want to go too much lower than that. But I do want to adjust the scale, because obviously this needs to be a tiny little sprinkle. So let's go 0.01. Okay, awesome. All right, now with our icing selected again, you'll notice, by the way, that if you click another object, you don't see your nodes because it's only going to show you the active object's geometry nodes. So if you want the nodes to just be there no matter what, if you click the pin button there, that means no matter what is selected, it's only going to be showing you this object's, the one that we pinned, geometry nodes. Okay. All right, so to reference, we need to reference that little sphere that we've just created in our geometry node system. And you can do it very easily just by dragging down from your outliner up here, just dragging it down into your geometry nodes and dropping it. Okay. So now let's just create some room here. Make a little bit of space. Okay. And what I need to do is add another node to reference this object. And the node is Shift A, Instances on Points, the top one. Okay, and then I want to drop it in here between distribute points on faces and my join geometry. So drop it in right there till it lights up. Now the points have disappeared because we're now saying replace those points with whatever is in that instance input. So I'm going to take my geometry from my object info and drag it into the instance. And look at that. We have got our spheres appearing all over it. And if I increase the density, we've got sprinkles. And if I do a render, it will actually display. Doesn't look very good, hey, but it does work, which is the main thing right now. Okay, so first things first, you'll notice that as we increase the density, first problem is that they're crowding each other. They are straight up overlapping each other with no respect for its fellow sprinkle, right? Because it's just a random distribution. So we can change that by going here in our distribute points on faces, change it from random distribution to Poisson disk distribution. Poisson, what a name. So it's changed, but that's just because it's changed your density max, so just increase it again. With this Poisson disk distribution, you get this extra value here, distance min. So now if we can set a low value, we can start to delete. It's almost like each one of those points now is going to have a little radius around it. And if it detects a point within that radius, it's going to delete it. So we just need to increase it slowly, very, very slowly, until we can't see them intersecting anymore. To about there, honestly. If you go too high, like if you really wanted to make sure they weren't touching, you go really high. But it starts to look like too evenly spaced, you know? Like, yeah, it's not actually registering the other objects. It's like it's just doing this little radius thing, which just happens to be perfect for a ball-shaped object. But it's not like an advanced, like it's going to try to fill in all the gaps for you. So yeah, you just kind of, I usually set it to like a little bit of clipping is okay, but I don't want there to be too much. But let's go, yeah, something, I don't know, something like that. We'll actually adjust this later on. I'm just doing it just for this point. All right, a much bigger problem, if I hit Control Tab to go full screen here, if I look at my mesh, I've got sprinkles everywhere. And in fact, I've actually got sprinkles underneath the icing. And that's not good because it's actually going to put that in the render. Even though you won't see it, your computer is going to use resources to render little individual balls underneath the icing. which is not what we want, obviously. So, going back here, what we need to do to fix this is we need to do weight painting, okay? It's not texture painting, it's a special thing called weight painting. So with your icing selected,
Weight paint.
if you go from your object mode, you'll see one there called weight paint. Now, your mesh will become blue, and weight paint is actually referenced in multiple parts of Blender. Like if you're doing rigging and animation, you would use weight painting a lot during the rigging step to assign values to certain bones.
Yeah, why would you use weight paint for this though?
Paint a value between 0 and 1 onto any part of the mesh, and then reference that however you want. So we can then reference that weight paint mask in our geometry nodes and use this almost as, well, exactly as a mask for our sprinkles. So if we just do some paint right here on it, you'll see that we have some colors, right? Now these colors aren't going to appear in the render. It's just for you to visualize those values. The blue value means a value of 0, and the red value is a 0 of 1. I believe actually in maybe not the next version of Blender, but maybe the version, I don't know, but they're planning to change the colors of this. So depending on the value, on how late watching this you are, your colors might be different here, but it should be the same. Essentially, you should have a brush of 1, and you should be able to paint from 0, which would give a blue value in this case, to a value of 1. So whatever is 1, whatever is red, is where our sprinkles will go.
I believe
this is not having any effect. Okay, so we need to reference it. Now, that weight paint that we just did is actually, if we go to our data tab here,
that's also gonna
group. Okay, so
it paints through too.
So you could actually create multiple weight paint types just by like creating them here.
What?
But we've just created one, and it's added one here for us.
Okay, I'm gonna watch this for a second.
By double clicking it, and let's call it sprinkle mask. Okay. In fact, is it a mask? It's more of a density, sprinkle density, I guess, because it's not a masking out. Anyway, all right, sprinkle density. Okay, and where I want to reference this in my geometry node stack is in the distribute points on faces. There is one value here called density factor, which we got when we used the Poisson disk thing. And this is just a value of 0 and 1. So if I drag out from here and then release, I can add in a new node and it'll just automatically connect it. And the node that you're looking for is called the named attribute. Don't feel bad if you're like, well, how would I know that it's called the named attribute? Because it's called vertex groups over here. You think like, okay, I'm going to type in vertex group, but it's an attribute, but it's one of many attributes, and geometry nodes can do many things, so it's just called the named attribute. So anyways, all right, so underneath name, we're just going to click that box, and you'll get a pop-up or pop-down, and you're looking for sprinkle density. And there it is. Haha. So now going back into weight paint mode, we can act like an artist and put the sprinkles wherever we want, sprinkles on our donut, which is really cool.
So I understand where he's going with that, but I would not use that technique for that. I want him to show underneath the donut, because I'm like 99% sure the frosting is going to have sprinkles underneath anyways. It doesn't matter, because what happens is when you paint, weight paint, it's going to paint through the object. Like, show me, please.
They're like on a plate, and then the wet donut with icing on it is just like dabbed onto it. So you get like a heavy amount of sprinkles right on the top like that, and then less around the sides. And then I usually do like a few like dabs like this, just for some variance. And then also if you hold down Control, that will do so the weight that's being painted is 1, but if I hold down Control, it's going to do a negative value. And I can adjust my strength there as well.
Did that mess up? Yeah, it did, because I did the
maybe a couple of years.
It's fine, it doesn't take long or anything.
And I'm trying to deliberately make it look.
Okay, let me go ahead and fix this real quick. Take 2 seconds. It's because I turned off these modifiers. Right? But so what he just essentially did was show a little bit of weight paint, right? In order to do weight paint, what I can do, which is way more precise and way more clean in my opinion, I can select this, use the technique from earlier, right, which highlights both sides, and you can see it's going, I'm almost at the bottom, but I did clip the bottom on this side. We can do one more, that's fine, right? And that's just going to have the extrude areas out. We could just highlight those real quick. So it's part of the density value. And we're only going to have one back face on the other side. That's it. I don't know why he would consider doing weight paint. It's very not, it's just not precise. In my opinion, what would end up being better is applying a solidify modifier, clipping the other side, which ends up cleaning out that whole area anyways. And maybe he'll show that later on, but like, I guess for a new person, it's fine, right? Because it's more along the lines they just want to teach you each tool. But it just seems very weird to me. So how do you apply it again? It was a named attribute. So we'll go to attribute. Is it stored name attribute? No. There we go. And then it's going to be density factor, right?
Okay. Look choppy, because I find that if you make it look too like uniform, then it just looks very boring and artificial. Because the real world would have more sprinkles collecting in certain areas than others, right? Maybe it's just like wetter on that part, right? So more would stick to it. Or more force was put on that part of the plate as the donut was dabbed into it, right?
Okay, I totally missed something.
It's an attribute, but it's one of many attributes, and geometry nodes can do many things, so it's just called the named attribute. So anyways,
let me see how he named it.
So underneath name, we're just going to click that box and you'll get a pop up or pop down, and you're looking for sprinkle density.
Really? I have sprinkle density. Is it because I'm in edit mode? I don't think it has anything to do with edit mode. Because he's in weight paint and his is working just fine. Let me go ahead and turn on geometry nodes and stuff like that. Maybe that's what it was because I didn't have geometry nodes enabled.
In certain areas than others, right? Maybe it's just like wetter on that part, right? So more would stick to it. Or more force was put on that part of the plate as the donut was dabbed into it, right? You just kind of have to think of this stuff. Because in the digital world, it's far too easy to make something that looks predictable and boring, and we don't want that. But there we go, something like that. And you could obviously finesse it and make it better than what it is, but that's what we've got. You'll notice each of these spheres have a very jagged-looking shape, and that's because the sphere itself, down here. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this. If you want to quickly zoom to an object without having to find it and pan around, number pad period key. Probably should have mentioned that before, but we haven't really needed it because we have not worked with that many objects, but that'll focus to that object. If you're on a laptop, by the way, if you hold down the tilde key, that'll bring up this section here, and then you've got view selected right there. So tilde is that key underneath your escape key. But anyways, so this is what our sphere looks like. So right click, shade smooth, and now all those sprinkles have a shade smooth. Haha.
Give me 1 second. I have someone at the door.
Show you a quick
One sec. Alrighty, we're back. I think one thing that I would like to see is like emphasis on keeping your stuff clean from the start. A lot of new players have develop a lot of bad habits. Hold on one second. A lot of new players, a lot of new Blender enthusiasts, they develop bad habits at the start, and it makes it more difficult later on, such as using too many subdivision modifiers. Right, he applied like 3 of them for the frosting.
If you were to duplicate your donut and create 2, and then on the second donut you're like, hey, I want to have some spice in my scene. I don't want to have the exact same count of sprinkles across both donuts. Let's give a different value to this one over here. Well, you can see that they are now sharing the same value because this node group here is being linked across both objects. But if you wanted, I mean, you could like, make it its own single object so that they're not linked. But if you wanted everything else to remain the same, so that let's say you change the sprinkle at some point, that's preserved across it. But that one value you want to be different across multiple objects, you can expose it. So just like what I did at the start, if I drag out from the value I want to expose, and then I put it up to here in my group input, the empty slot, if I just release it, it's now disappeared, the value's disappeared from here, and it's now appeared in my modifier stack over here. And now I can put in a different value. So this has now got a value of 2000.
Oh, that's interesting.
So essentially by dragging it out and exposing it, it's essentially removing the value from this node setup. And saying
that's super cool.
Separate thing, which is independent per object. And it has a 2 birds, 1 stone kind of effect, that it makes it more accessible. So in a completely different part of Blender, I'm working on my scene and I'm just very quickly giving different sprinkle amounts to different donuts, right? Like a madman, right? No one can stop me. But yeah, very cool. And that's now exposed. Oh, the other thing we probably want to do though, with that this group input here, is I want to give it a different name because density max, not really that useful. I can call it sprinkle density, right? So now it's like a fully customized little node group that I could drop on any object. I could be building a car in the future, and I'm like, it needs sprinkles. And I can just drop this on it, and I've got a sprinkle density value for my car, right? So you can see how geometry nodes, you can build something really customized for what you want, and then it's just readily accessible every time you need to use it. Awesome. Now, one issue that I will show you with this, and actually it's not specific to geometry nodes, but this entire time, for all these videos, we've been building a donut which is too big. So if you hit N in your properties, oh, that's the polygon thing, you can see the size, the dimensions of your donut is 1.2 by 1.2 meters, which for Americans, oh, actually, yeah, you can.
It's actually delicious. That's perfectly fine in my opinion.
Imperial one, yeah, 4 feet, right? Okay, which is way too big. Okay. Now, why does it matter, right? Because like, okay, if you're looking at this, how are you to actually know that this is 1.2 meters rather than the regular size donut? It doesn't actually matter yet, but when we get to like rendering with depth of field, or maybe you want to import other objects from other scenes, having a value that is actually true to the object will save you so much time. And it'll also make it so that your camera settings, etc., are actually correct. So that bit is very important. So essentially, we should resize this. And really, a real donut is about 12 centimeters, which is exactly 1/10 of what we've got right here. So if we select everything in the entire scene, which you can do by just hitting A for everything, I don't know, A for all, yeah, that makes more sense, okay. Then, if we hit S to scale, okay, we're now in a scale, oh, actually, okay. Well, now it's going to scale it, and the plane is going to be off the ground. Okay. All right. Well, let's not scale the lamp and the camera. So everything else, selecting the donut, the lamp, the donut, the plane, and the sphere. Then S, and then I want to scale it by exactly 10%. Now, how could I do that? Well, if you look in the top left-hand corner, you've got the values there. And if I went to 0.1, then it would be exactly 1/10 of what it was. But how can I get it exactly at 0.1? Well, two things. One, if you hold down Control, when you're moving any value in Blender, it'll move it in increments, which in this case is 0.1. But you can also actually just type in the exact value you want, 0.1, and hit enter. And now, if we look at the size of our donut, click N, hit N, you can see it's 0.12 meters, or centimeters, you know. Anyway, and that's great. But there is a problem. What you might notice, I mean, there's not a problem now, but when you change the scale or the rotation of an object, actually, it's only changed its what do you call it? Its local scale. It hasn't actually applied it on a global level yet. So the
I already applied mine, but yeah,
have actually got a like pretend value. The scale is set at 0.2, and it's almost like it's saying to the scene, that's not its real scale. It's just been faked to be that size yet. It needs to be applied if you want to like confirm really that this is the true scale or rotation of the thing. And you do that by selecting the things and then hitting Control A and then applying scale. Okay, so now we've done that, we can see something's changed. So our donut here with the sprinkles has now massively changed its density count. And the reason for this is that if we go geometry nodes again, let's zoom in here. Let's look at it with this. This density, this sprinkle density, is actually not the count of sprinkles at all. It's the density in relation to the whole scene. And the way I think of it is like, okay, it's a weird visualization, but if you've got a car and it's driving along a highway, right, a certain amount of bugs are going to hit the windshield, okay? And the bugs could be defined by here. But the smaller the object is, right, you could have the same amount of bugs going across the highway. But if it was like a tiny Matchbox car, there's going to be very few bugs that's going to hit it, okay? So the density is kind of like the density of the world. And now that we've made the object smaller, there's only 3 sprinkles left. There's only 3 bugs that's hit the windshield of our donut here. So this value now needs to be much bigger. In fact, it needs to be exactly like if it was 6,000 before, it needs to be 60,000 now. But the problem is that it's not just a value here. The distance min value has also changed because this is also based on a real world value. So this now needs to be really small. So let's try 0.01. And that's actually pretty good, I think. There's a little bit of overlap, but that's roughly kind of what we want. And let's see if I can increase this. Yeah, so if I want this density to be really dense, yeah, I would have to increase it to a crazy number. Now, something I like to do personally, this isn't, you have to do this, but you notice how like this number is really large. And if I want to increase or lower my sprinkle value, and I'm in a different part of Blender, if I'm just dragging this value, it's having no effect because the range, like the scale of it is just so large. So what I actually do is I set it to a value that I think makes sense, which in this case is 200. And then whatever the value was before, it was 200,000, right? I do a math value inside of my geometry node setup. Between here and here, I do a math calculation to multiply that by the value that it needs to be, almost as like a scale adjustment. So you can do it with just one node, Shift A, Utilities, Math, and just drop it in here. Now the math, I said I want to multiply it, so I need to change it from add to a multiply. And math is the most versatile.
What was it on?
Node. You can do all sorts of stuff, and I'm in a different part of Blender. If I'm just dragging this value, it's having no effect because the range.
I think it was
like, the scale.
It was math. Is it under utilities?
So what I
yeah.
do is I set it to a value that I think.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Which in this case is 200, and then whatever the value was before, it was 200,000, right? I do a math value inside of my geometry node setup. Between here and here, I do a math calculation to multiply that by the value that it needs to be, almost as like a scale adjustment. So you can do it with just one node, Shift A, Utilities, Math, and just drop it in here. Now the math, I said I want to multiply it, so I need to change it from add to a multiply. And math is the most versatile of any node. You can do all sorts of stuff, but multiply. So multiply, and it was 200,000 before. So if I want this value 200, then I just add 1,000. Yes, that's correct. Okay. So now
Sure.
I I can very quickly change the scale of the sprinkles across the donut without having to like manually type in the value. I can just move it back and forth. And there you go. So that's it. So we've changed the scale of it to what it should be. We've got a correct density. Sorry, we've got a correct sprinkle setup, looking good. In the next part, we are going to be adding long sprinkles to our donuts because this round one is okay. And I originally was just going to go round to try and keep it simple, but there's also, I don't know, the long sprinkles just look way nicer. But you do have to do some different rotation math and stuff. So we're going to do that in a whole second video. So click here on the screen to learn all about that and random colors. So I will see you in that part.
Probably something like that. Maybe a little bit more.
Sprinkles. Why not long sprinkles? It'll be more interesting and it'll enable us to learn some new techniques about Blender, which is what this whole series is about.
Hello, studios. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good day, brother.
So first things first, we need to model those sprinkles. So let's move to the left here. And we want to add an object. We haven't mentioned it before, but when you add an object, it's going to put it at your 3D cursor. And your 3D cursor is that thing. That weird little thing, little crosshair at the bottom there. That's your 3D cursor. And yeah, I don't know, Blender has a 3D cursor, maybe other applications don't. It's going to put it there. And if you don't want it there, you can move that 3D cursor somewhere else by hitting Shift and right-clicking. And you can see it's now moved.
I feel old when I consider that I'm using version 2.91. So when I was doing modeling for a while, I was using 3.1.12, I think, for a very long time. Actually, it was 3.1.2. And it's because a lot of add-ons and stuff have like support for the older versions of Blender, not so much for the newer one. So people have a hard time switching. I can vibe that. You can't switch anymore. Yeah, trust me, I get it. I hear it all the time, brother.
Change the radius all the way to its lowest and the depth all the way to its lowest as well. And the vertices, that's the like the resolution, right? Oh, we'll fix that in a sec. The resolution would be way too high at 32 to be scattered on an object. So let's set this to 12, and that'll be just enough that it won't look jagged and it'll look smooth. Okay, great.
Yeah, a lot of people get conditioned to the older versions. It just makes it almost impossible.
Okay. Now this problem that you have, if you go in too far, it disappears. The reason for that is that Blender has a clipping start value.
Oh.
And because we're working at
Are we making the...
small,
yeah, I
small
can make
scale,
some of those.
Sprinkle-sized things now. It's too small and it's clipping it out.
Hello,
So
hello.
you hit N and go to your View tab. The clip start value there, it's 1 centimeter by default. Drag it all the way to the left, and it's now a millimeter, and it will have fixed that. I don't know why it's...
Can I make a 3D model of a bus?
Why is that not the default value? Maybe there's a reason. But
A Kazan bus?
Because then you never have this problem. I don't know any disadvantages. So anyway, we've got the base of a sprinkle. Need to make it long, so tab into edit mode. S.
Looks like a van.
Z along the Z axis to elongate it.
Oh, okay. You mean like one of those red ones? Double deckers? I probably could, but it would take a while.
There's no actual answer to that. If you look at reference, they are all over the place. The government evidently never stepped in and said, like, we're going to regulate it. This is the length of...
I mean, I could. The main thing that I'm doing right now is I'm just going over the donut tutorial because I've never done the donut.
What that means as artists is we get to pick whatever is most visually pleasing. And I like the ones which are more readable. And to show you what I mean, if we pull up 2, right? This one on the left is like large sprinkles, right? Very like bold. And then one on the right here is like long, thin, wispy ones that look like they get stuck in your teeth.
Those are just selected.
And if we zoom out on this, and then zoom out on this, you can see that the ones on the right tend to kind of like, the colors and everything just kind of blur together and it just looks like a donut. Whereas the one on the left, the sprinkles are still readable. So That's what we mean by readable, and that's the one I like the most. So we're going to go with some larger looking long sprinkles.
Yeah.
But
2.91 is pretty outdated.
I think it's actually like it's from a piping bag, at least if you make them at home, but you can just pipe out icing.
Yeah, I'd be able to make one of those.
And it becomes sprinkles. But yeah, they just come out at any odd size. So we got long ones, we got medium ones, we got short ones, and we've even got some curvy looking ones, right? These little like
curvy ones,
bent-ish looking ones. So we're going to model small, medium, large, and a bent-ish looking one, and then we're going to scatter that across the object. So back in Blender,
yeah, like I noticed, so what they're doing now with blenders, they're adding a lot of like realistic modifiers, or they're making it easier for like newer modelers to be able to do like very fancy things. And I think it's super cool, you know. If you're comfortable and you're happy with an older version of Blender, it doesn't matter. Just enjoy there's no real need to update your Blender version until you hit the capacity of your version, right? Like if it does everything that you needed to do and you're happy with it, then it works. But I might be old, you know. I'm the kind of guy that will drive an old car. It's a car, it works. Like yeah. I mean, if it works for you, that's all that matters. At the end of the day, you're the one using it, you know.
Yeah, this will be the short one, okay? But the end, speaking of which, this end bit here, it's a very sharp edge, and even if we hit shade smooth, it's not going to solve it. We want that like a rounded form to it, not this horrible blobby looking shape. Because the reference, again, you can see, it's a different reference now, is a rounded shape. All right. So to create that rounded form, we're going to create a bevel, and so I want you to go into face select mode, okay, which you can do by that. So this is the faces, right? This is the edges, if you go to edge select mode, and then this is the face there.
Yeah.
So select the bottom and
yeah, like for me, I started in 3.1.12, and like a lot of the add-ons and stuff that I was using was compatible with that. And I do like a lot of modeling and stuff like that for VR chat. So for me, I had to use it. But then like I just updated, I deleted all my old projects. You don't use many add-ons. Yeah. I mean, like I used probably about 5. 5 were like the ones I would go to. Like Retopo Flow was a big one for me. I was using Burmian. Burmian is cool, I guess, but I don't sculpt that much. Oh, they're for a game? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the information, like what I've seen people do, is they'll take the FBX file. They won't use the blend file, they'll use the FBX. So they pretty much export it, and then they would re-import it into the newer version, because the blend file is what typically breaks, right? When you try and open up an older save with a newer version, it just breaks everything because of the way everything. Yeah, it just gets crazy. Typically, if you FBX files, they're universal. Like I can send you an FBX from like a super old version of Blender. It will just be missing a lot of information, right? It won't, like, let's say if Blender super far back in the day didn't have seams, and then you imported the FBX, well, you're not going to have any seams value because they just don't exist, right? And then again, it's just taking the vertice values and whatever information it has, and then it's just a new object, right? It's like, pretend it's a primitive, right? So like I've been interested in making stuff for games, but I'm not nearly that good yet. It takes a lot of work, man. Yeah, I mean, if you're happy with your version, use it, bro, because it's for you. It doesn't matter. what anyone else thinks.
And this is, you can see it's like, yeah, it's just adding a 45-degree angle on that corner there.
Teaches you a lot.
If you scroll up, it's going to add another level to it. And if you scroll up again, it's going to add another level to that. So we can very quickly create.
Oh, does he want me to make beveled sprinkles? Yeah, we could do that.
Too much high because again, this is going to be scattered all over the donut. Don't want to go too high poly. So that'll do. So that's a simple bevel operation, and it's.
I hate making n-gons. This is like triggering the crap out of me.
Is how you do that. All right, so look at that. We've got one sprinkle. So now we will need to create 3 more. So this is the small. So let's go Shift D and then X to just move it along the X-axis. This is going to be the medium one. So edit mode, and I'm going to go into toggle wireframe and vertice select mode. And now selecting the top part of the sprinkle, hit G, Z, and I'm going to move, oops, if you've got proportional editing, turn that off, G, Z.
Yeah, like the best way to learn is always through like games and stuff like that.
And now Shift D, X, move it along. This is going to be the long.
Oh, we're just making a crap ton of them. Okay.
G,
okay.
Z, move it up. And this is going to be the long sprinkle. I don't go too long, maybe that long. Okay. And then I want to make a bent sprinkle. It's slightly like curved. So Shift D, X, move it across. And now with this one, if I was to try to like curve this out, there's not enough information here. Like if I move that, it's just a straight edge there. So if I want to make it curve,
let's go like this.
So like we've done in the past, Control R is how you create a loop cut. So when you do that, it says, where do you want to put it? I want more than one though. So I'm going to scroll up till I get, yeah, just a bunch of loops until I get what looks like square faces on those points, somewhere around that. I don't want to go too high poly. Yeah, like that. What is that?
Am I watching this for the total modeling or just geometry? I'm doing it for total. I've never done the donut, and I've been doing this like on and off for about a year. So because I've done it for so long, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't. And there's like a lot of people actually say it's a bad tutorial. They'll say, you know, this and that or whatever. Personally, I just want to try it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't take someone's opinion and as fact. You know, I gotta just give it a shot. Because you never know. Like, I'd never worked with geometry nodes. Yeah, I mean, some people have to learn through just working on it. Some people have to learn through tutorials. Personally, I just learned from hitting walls. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's like I'll do a project, I'll hit a wall, I'll not know how to do it, and then I'll look around, and then I end up on Blender Secrets channel, and he has a fix that solves the issue for me within half a second. You know, like it really depends. Like I probably watch Blender Secrets mostly because he has a lot of really good like tips. He's really good. I mean, it varies, man. Like to me, my whole thing when it came to Blender, and like when I'm chilling on VR chat and people are asking, it's like, oh, how do you do it? How do you do it? It's like, dude, you just gotta figure out what's your rhythm, man. When you're old, you'll know how you have to learn. When you're young, you have to figure out how you need to learn, right?
That's in the bottom left-hand corner. 8 cuts. Okay. Click, and then it's saying where do you want to place it. Right-click to cancel the movement, so it places it right in the center.
Teach by you privately.
Yep, there we go. Okay. Now we've got this one over here that is just long and straight but low poly, and this one same shape but high poly. So to add a bend to it, in previous tutorials, I actually went into like edit mode.
What's triggering me is his origin is set to like the base of the sprinkle. So when it gets applied, it's gonna be like all over the place. Like that origin placement is, yeah, it's triggering the crap out of me. Like you'll like right off the bat, I set the cursor there and set my origin and everything like that, just because, man, that is one thing about his tutorial. He shows you a lot of cool tools and he shows you how to work with them. I was saying this earlier, like he teaches you how to mess around with tools, but he also teaches a lot of bad habits. For example, when working with the frosting, he wanted the density based on weight paint, right? And when you're weight painting, it goes through the object, right? You can set the weight paint to be front face only, but when you have a solidify modifier, it goes through anyways. So the only way to actually correctly do it is you would have to apply the solid modifier. Weight paint is disgusting. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. Sometimes it's easy. But as far as like applying density, it doesn't make any sense. It's to me it's better to just select the vertexes themselves. So what I did was I'll go into edit mode, select the middle, and then control plus until I select all the vertexes that I want, the vertices that I want, and then I'll assign it to the group. You know what I mean? It's just way cleaner, it's way more specific, and that kind of like bad habit development that he teaches at times, it's triggering, right? Like the origin. But he is very motivating and he does go over tools, which I think is great. Yeah, I have a Discord. It's same as my YouTube name, Makano Yasha. Like there's certain things he does that I can give a lot of good praise for. You can give me 15k tips. Yeah, I mean like there's certain things that I feel like hold me back a lot, but I think I'm all right. I think the main thing that I need to work on is like anatomy, right? Because I want to do a lot of like clothing design and all sorts of stuff like that. I'm about to be blessed. Yeah, sure. I'll add you. Yeah, for me, it's like I want to learn how to do basic clothing to hard surface. I really like hard surface like modeling too. Like hard surface looks really cool. Like some of the things people do with hard surface is just phenomenal. I just have a hard time with the topology at times. Yeah, I know, because you were talking about the B52 and everything. Typically, with whenever it comes to like either architecture or when it comes to like vehicles or anything like that, that's all hard surface. Anything, I mean, typically metal and stone is hard surface, right? The only thing I don't want to do is the actual sculpting. I think sculpting is like hell because at that point you have to know how to do retopology in order to gain any benefit whatsoever from sculpting. Like, sure, you can do renders, but for practical use, it's unusable. Like, no one can run around with a 2 million poly anything. I always really like the water effects. Water effects are super cool. That's easy. It depends on the water effect. Water effects can get complicated really quickly. like um like I was looking at this one that they're using for what was his name? There's this Japanese guy that always like takes records and pushes Blender to new heights and stuff like that. He always posts like his Blender renders on Twitter, and people just get fascinated with the stuff he can do on Blender. It's just like insane. Like everything from the spark effects from whenever like metal hits metal to water effects, it's always just like amazing. It's full blown movie productions taken to like the next level kind of status. If that makes sense.
proportional editing. It was just complicated, and it
I'll go ahead and move this
great.
right here.
I've learned actually there's a modifier that'll do it very simply. Go to your
Yeah,
modifier
I can look them up.
add modifier. You could find it
Probably
inside
take like
here,
2 seconds.
or you could search for it, but it's the simple deform modifier. So add that, and by default it is wrong. So change it from twist to bend. And look at that. We've got our sprinkle.
Ooh, simple deform.
Change the amount from a little curve to a large curve. And I think somewhere around the 30-degree mark. You will notice though that it's like it's bent more at this angle, and that's because it's bending it according to the origin.
Your origin,
So
yeah, because your origin is placed at a weird position, bro.
Point, and it's used for a lot of things. Like if you rotate an object, you can see it's rotating from
You're proportional
at origin point. Like physics, a bunch of things use the origin point. The best way to think of it is like the center of mass for the object. So generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you want it to be in the center of the object. And you can do it very quickly. You select multiple objects. You want to clear its origin point. Shift, select all of them, and then right-click, and then say Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. And now you can see it's put it in the middle. And now our curve is actually based on the starting in the middle. So yay for us. Now I need to apply this.
Look at his little face. So much. It just starts abusing him.
Yeah. Realized onto the Okay, so going to your outline, you can see we've.
I mean, at least he did teach how to fix it, but personally, it's always like handle that at the beginning, because in Blender, in 3D modeling, always handle crap at the beginning, because as you put layers and layers and layers upon it, it becomes a way bigger problem later on. And I know it's just origin, right? But it's simple little things like that that add up over time.
Well, we started from humble beginnings, but we've now got too much going on, and it's all starting to get a little bit.
Yeah, dude, we got like 15 cylinders and stuff.
In your outline and in Blender generally, you can group things together by creating collections. So by default, we've actually.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do a sprinkle collection.
But we can create new collections by this little button in the top right-hand corner to create a new collection. And I want to create it outside of our. I mean, I don't actually know if we need. Like, I don't know why it creates a collection for you. For no, I mean, you could just. It's in the scene collection. So, anyways, I don't know if we actually need that one. So we create a new collection just by hitting that, and we can double-click it to rename it to be whatever it is we want. So I'm going to call this.
That he wouldn't need if he was knowledgeable, yeah.
And because we have two types of sprinkles, we have the sphere round sprinkle.
Yeah, we do have many.
Create two other
sphere sprinkle.
So hitting new again, you can see it's placed it underneath it, and I'm going to call this one round. And then again, I'll add another collection, and this one I will call.
Dude, that's way too many.
Long. Oh wait, sorry, this one long. There we go. Okay, so to move something to a collection, you can do it one of two ways. One, you can select the sphere, which is the round. Remember, it's this little guy over here, the little tiny round sprinkle. You can just drag that.
You getting ear cancer? I need to pour bleach in my ear, man.
The other way is in your 3D viewport. If you select all of the objects that you want to move to a new collection, hit M, and it brings up this, and you just say move to the sprinkles long sub collection. There we go. And now they're all moved there. And now this one here, if you wanted to give this a name, you could.
This man on God.
We got the camera, we got the light, we got the plane. Yeah, you know what? Let's move our donut and our icing. Let's move that to
I think
as well. So M, and we can actually create.
You're German.
From the move.
All good.
Options as well. So I'm going to go new, and let's call this let's say donuts, because we're going to duplicate it and make more donuts in the future. So donuts. Okay. Great. So now this one here has got the camera, the light, and the plane. So I'm going to do.
So you're going to call it scene?
Let's just call this one ENV, which is for environment. Since this is a tutorial, I'll actually just type it out. I'm not going to be lazy. Environment. Okay. So we've got some organization in our scene.
Okay.
So that as we add and grow our scene, it's not going to get too crazy. All right. So it's also good that we've created collections, because we can now use that to scatter across the geometry nodes. So with our donut here, so the icing and the donut, we're going to create a duplicate, and this is going to be the variant with the long sprinkles. So Shift D, and then hit X to move it along the X axis. So it's just placed next to it. and then clicking your icing, you can see we've got the modifier stack that we created the geometry nodes on. And if we were to start tweaking this and make this look like long sprinkles, it would apply to this one over here, because we can see that little number next to it. And that number, if you hover over it, I think we mentioned it before, but it displays the number of users.
Turn off the sound on the vid.
So any change you make to this is
how do
reflected.
Oh, well, yeah, I could do it this way. Hold on one second. Just go like that. Yeah. Mm. Yep. Yeah. Your ears are gonna implode. You shouldn't be hearing it at all. Yeah, there's no volume on it now. Yeah. Oh, so now he's teaching us groups of objects. I mean, I'm not I'm not terrible. Oh, that's why he did that. Okay. Mine's not using it. What happened? Oh, you have to drag it into that thing? That's dumb. Failed to find? Why can't it find it? Oh, yeah. Hold on. Oh my god, I'm breaking everything. What am I doing? After seeing that long sprinkle? Yeah. It's because I didn't apply scale. So wait, for the geometry node, it wants you to apply the rotation from here to here, right? But why would he rotate the object instead of doing something like go into here, go to utilities? Pretty sure you can do a math thing, right? Um Actually, no. Does that not work? Yeah, there we go. So it doesn't work with the this angle thing, right? Pulling it down to here. It has to go to like either vector or center, I'm assuming. Stupidness of Blender Guru. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you rotate the actual object itself? It's almost never desired to do that kind of a rotation, right? So this actually isn't doing anything. No, it was. That's weird. So let's try increments of 15 and see what it does. Maybe it stops at a certain point. Yeah, it stops at 30. So we'll leave this at 0. Change this to 60. Yeah, dude, why would you do He just taught about the axes too. And you could probably do a randomness too. We'll use the 90 that he likes, and then I want to create a distortion. So maybe there's a way of further distorting. Use particle systems, Gur. I mean, yeah, you could just use a particle system and it would solve a lot of the issues. We actually need to turn this down to 150, 100. This is one hairy donut. Something like that. Yeah. There's a lot of clipping too. Okay. Now it looks a little bit. Particle would save so much time right now, but nah, I gotta do it the Blender Guru way. Yeah. A lot of people use particle systems for a lot of things. I think I can think of a couple applications where this would actually be useful, such as like whenever you're generating like a lot of fur, this might be a way of using like very simple shapes to keep the poly count down low, but you can create a good amount of density that way versus like doing something like particles would generate way too many. Yeah, like I've tried doing the particle way, but it's always felt like it's generated so much extra density, like it tends to group up in certain locations from what I've seen. Sure. Oh, never mind. Wants it on here. Am I using the wrong one? Why is this so... Why is he so zoomed in? I never understood. Well, I mean, that's like fur texturing, right? No, no, those are actual pieces. Mixture of both. Hold on, let me pull. He's playing the guitar, isn't he? Yeah, he's playing the guitar. Yeah, a mixture of both. Probably could do... That poor sprinkle down there. You see him performing a ritual at the bottom. Yeah, you know, like some of the people make pretty cool animatronics. He got the distillery for the moonshine and everything. Yep. Yep. This bro is straight up using half his screen to look at like the max and everything. It is super goofy. Like, why is he so zoomed in? Like, why is he so zoomed? Like, even on a tutorial, right? It is super simple to like say I'm working on this section right here. I know for a fact you can see where my mouse is at right now. Like you can see I'm mousing over this right now. If I wanted to show you the specific values, you can create a clip of another window to, you know, show the values and everything like that. Zoomed in. It just blows my mind because what is he even working on right now? I look away for a second and he's looking at some max value in ID seed, and it's I know he's working at the randomizer. I think he's working in vectors, right? But it's just like the fact that it's almost impossible to tell what the hell he's looking at. It's so goofy to me. Like, it's just so zoomed in. Like, why are you so zoomed in, bro? Yeah, I already changed the distance, man, bro. You're like 500 years behind. I mean, yeah, sure, they're bigger noodles and everything, but they kind of just look like. See, I called them noodles. They're bigger sprinkles, but they look like noodles. At first, you were looking at Blender or Blender streams to critique on my work and learn, and now I found someone that needs to learn. I mean, I've done quite a bit of stuff. Like, I've made avatar models and stuff like that. It's just I'm doing the tutorial just to do it. I've heard so many people critique his work and stuff like that, and I gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? All right, I'm gonna do the rite of passage, and I'm gonna do his Blender stuff. Like, I'm gonna do his little donut thing. How many videos do we have left? Call you on Discord and done. Yeah, but I mean, I don't necessarily need teaching per se. I need to just do the work. That's the thing. I'm lazy. Like, I haven't forwarded any of my projects. Hold on one second. Let me go on my network. Do. Long path I have to go to. One second. I believe that was it. And then, is that it? No. Hold on one second. Okay. It was probably this and then this. Oh, network, please. I have a hard drive that I use for all my storage. Pretty sure that was it. There we go. God, that was obnoxious. Backup files, packages. Is this the one? Might be the one. This was made in December, so I think this might be the one. One second. File. And then it will probably tell me no access, but let's see. No, it's there. That's the most recent? Nope, wrong one. Hold on. Let me go ahead and find the file real quick. God, this is going to be so obnoxious. Should have been there. I'll just go Unity projects. Okay, assets would be under that one. Mesh. Yep. And then it's broken because all of the materials and stuff like that, but we'll just go like that. And then what did it go under? Sprinkles, of course, sprinkles. There we go. So this made these right here. The shoes, body, head, and hair I didn't do, but there's also like a bunch of other assets and stuff like that that I've made, such as like I've made one of the rings that I made is very popular. Then I have of course I made these. Hold on one second. Like I have a fully programmed long path to go. I mean, yeah, there's stuff to learn, but I don't feel like it's terrible at the moment. For example, here's one of the bands that I have, which apparently has a tailbone because of the import. Which this is super textured and everything like that. So this looks very simple, but if I go into shading, oh no, shading broke because of 3.1.12. But yeah, I have a Gumroad where you can see a lot of the assets that I've posted publicly. Don't have many that I've like some of the stuff that I've made privately. Like there was a bow tie that I made with like a bee on it. I've made like some hair ribbons. I've made like a lot of like individual stuff that I give out. Like there was a fish that I made, like a fish sword, and then I would sit on Unity for about probably 2 months before I actually release the damn thing, because I'm always doing like the playable layers and stuff like that, which kind of just, it adds so much to it. Because instead of just doing like a simple Blender asset and then selling it, right? I sit there and make it usable for like VRC and stuff. Um, what is some complicated meshes that I've done? I don't think this was that complicated, was it? No, this one wasn't too complicated. Let me go ahead and where are you? There we go. So I made a little mask thing, which was cool. Again, it adds a tailbone because of the whenever it imports back and forth. Haven't slept yet? Should sleep. Yeah, this is something that I need to finish because I need to post it. Like, I have textures and stuff like that. It's just I haven't worked on it recently. Power naps are a good thing too. But to each their own. And then we have, what else is pretty good? My wife likes the glasses. I made these glasses a while back. Hide armature real quick. And these are transparent. It's just all the materials are handled on Substance Painter. I don't do it in Blender. So these don't have any alpha. It's just the base model itself. But everything is painted, of course. And of course, they have bones and everything. They move. I try and keep projects down to like about a week. You don't use anything but Blender? Well, I make stuff for VR chat, and I do make stuff for other things such as like, let's say you're a VTuber, right? And you need an FBX to interact with a certain object or whatever. Like, I'll do stuff for that. Mainly most of my stuff is for VR chat. Right. Like, here's a crown with I had a bunch of different textures for this one too. And then I was working on blend shapes too, so it's like a cracked, like where some of these will break off and stuff. Challenge me to make a ship. Too much work. Like, again, like if it's over a month, I generally don't work on it. If I get commissioned, I'll do it. Takes 2 days to make one. I guess it depends on the level of detail, right? You challenge me. Let's see. How long would it take me? A good one? Like, to make anything that I'd be willing to show, it would probably take me about 2 weeks to a month. Like, if it's a rowboat, sure, 2 days, easy. But if we're talking about like a full-fledged ship, probably a bit longer than that. 18th century cutter. Yeah, I could probably do that. You're talking about something like, yeah, like a stereotypical like navy sailboat, right? Whoever does it better wins. I don't have the time for that. Like I just don't. And I wouldn't have a use for it either. Like for me, like it's cool and all, but I wouldn't have a practical use. Model boat and you have a boat. Yeah, but I wouldn't be able to use it for anything. Like yeah, you could use it for something in the future. Of course, like infinite possibilities. Like there eventually you might find a use where it's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that one boat that I made." But typically a lot of the stuff that I do is around clothing and stuff people could use for VRC. Like if I go to make an environment, yeah, because even making a like a naval boat wouldn't be good for VRC. It's just too many it's too much weight, too many faces. HMS Royals, Sovereign of the Seven Seas. What's that? Yeah, again, it goes back to the boat thing. I don't have a purpose of boats. Like I don't have any purpose of boats at all. Like again, if I were to use it for something like in VR chat, if I were to make one of those boats, that is the world. And even then, I don't think I would do that. My wife would kill me. She would murder me. She already gets motion sickness in VR. And then I go to port it into VR and you add just a little bit of motion that makes people go up and down. Oh my god, I would get murdered. Probably be pretty easy with a cloth thing too. Those are generally pretty nice. Yeah, how many vertice count is that? Like how many tries? Probably a lot, I'm assuming, right? $32K. 32 about 33K is pretty good for tries. 32,000 triangles. I mean, I could probably do that. It's just again, it comes down to I wouldn't have a use for it. Like I don't make like I don't have any purposes of like model ships or anything like that. We could do if you want to do like a cyberpunk clothing outfit, that's something I could do a challenge on. Cuz that's something I could actually just resell at the end of a challenge. I mean, you, people still use hard surface for that kind of stuff too, though. It's generally the cloth that people use, like either a cloth sim or something like that. It's the same thing for the sales. Like a lot of cyberpunk outfits, they tend to have like a lot of metal and parts like that. Took you 2 days to make that cutter. Yeah, especially if you've done like the base of it before, right? Like if you've done the base of it before, you can clear the like certain parts of it and then you can add to it and then you cut a lot of the work down. One, if you didn't sleep. Fair enough. But yeah, it's getting pretty late over here. It's already like 10:30. Probably going to be calling it a night. That is a pretty cool cutter though. But yeah, studios, if you ever want to talk about Blender again, you can always hit me up. I plan to finish this tutorial just to have it done and out of the way. But I'm probably calling it there. The game that you work for? Yeah. I mean, yeah, but again, that's adding like a practical use to it, right? When you have a practical use for something, it definitely dramatically changes a lot of factors. It enables you to work on projects for a longer period of time and then like you're being productive. If you're not doing it full time, then finding time to do stuff like that, it definitely does change things. And then you're also going to find like the progress itself usually takes longer. When it's for a job, you have a lot of resources, you have people that you can talk to, or like it's just something that you've been working on for a while. It You can compare it to like a diner, right? The person in the back making a burger might only take like 10 minutes, but that's because the grill's already on, the food's already prepped, and that's what they do all day long, right? Versus making a burger at home, like takes an hour because you got to get everything set up and you got to get into the groove and you know what I mean? Like typically for me, I try and stick to stuff that I'm going to be able to resell or find a purpose for, you know. And as long as I'm doing that, I can find motivation to work on it for longer periods of time. For example, doing the donut stream, it's going to be another video on my channel. If I knew how old you are, you're probably around my age. Maybe older, maybe younger. 34? Down, far down. As in, you're much older? Yeah. See? Like, for example, for me, like hanging out with the wife, got work. I got a kid for the weekends. Like I typically can't work on modeling that much, but I do on the free time. Anyways, brother, I'm gonna be calling it around there. I hope you enjoyed your time here, even with Blender Guru triggering the crap out of you. But I hope you have a wonderful day, brother. I hope you don't feel too exhausted later on. Maybe you have some coffee or something. Making chips? Yeah. All right, brother. You take care. Later.